All right, good evening. Welcome to the October 3rd meeting of the Orange County Board of Commissioners. Commissioner McKee telephoned me earlier, Earl, and said that he was going to be here, but that he would be between 30 and 60 minutes late, but that he was working hard and would get here as soon as he could. So, are there any additions or changes to the agenda tonight? There's an item to add to the consent agenda. So there is item 8J, which is at your places. This is an item regarding the approval of ownership transfer purchase of Cedar Valley and Eflin properties from the sheriff's office. So we need a motion to add that to the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to add 8J to the consent agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, 8J is added.
And there's also, if you look down just a little bit further, to add another closed session item.
Okay, and so we have a closed session already scheduled, and we'll have an additional item to.
And you probably need to add that here, so then it will be at the end of the agenda, yeah.
Okay, so we need a motion to add an additional item to the closed session agenda for the purpose of discussing matters related to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the public body in negotiations.
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to add that to the closed session agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so that item is added to the, will be added to the closed session when we make the motion to go into closed session at the end of the meeting.
Chair Dorson, one other item. On your agenda detail sheet, I had originally asked that the Adult Care Home and Community Advisory Committee be moved up because the chair was here to explain a new state statute. He did stop by, but there's been a couple of other changes since we published this particular abstract, and he just asked if it could be deferred and to be brought back at a later date. And that's 11A.
Okay, so we need a motion to, at the suggestion of the clerk, to remove item 11A from the agenda and defer that to a future agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously, and so 11A is off the agenda. Anything else, Comrade Clerk?
There's just things at your places.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
No other changes, though, to the agenda. So there are several items at our places here. There is a PowerPoint for agenda item 6B about the Home Program Committee. There's a handout for agenda item 6D about the Golden Leaf Community Grants Making Initiative. And then there's a printed copy of the calendar, which is item 6C, I believe. Yeah, 6. It's 6E. I'm sorry, 6E.
It's just a larger version of the calendar,
Right.
easier to read.
It's just easier to read on the eyes. And then there is also a copy of a PowerPoint on the transportation item, which is 6C. Yes, that's 6C. Okay. All right, so you should have all that. And with that out of the way, we'll turn now to public comment. So this is the part of the meeting where we invite the members of the public, if they would like to speak to items that are not on the printed agenda. Of course, we have comments for items on the agenda when we get to those items during the meeting. And it doesn't look like there's anyone.
No one has signed up.
No one has signed up for this, for the open public comment section. So then we will move to announcements, petitions, and comments by board members. We'll try to keep that to 3 minutes per. And we'll start with Mia?
I have none tonight.
All right. Penny?
I have none, thank you.
Mark?
I went to the International Bluegrass Musicians Association weekend over in Raleigh this last weekend and heard a artist named Molly Tuttle playing her guitar, and it turned out she was the first female IBMA Guitar Player of the Year, joining Tony Rice and Doc Watson and Brian Sutton and other luminaries. I went to a workshop. Somebody asked what kind of guitar she played, and her guitar of choice is the pre-war guitar that was made here in Hillsborough at the fairly new guitar company here. So I thought folks might like to know about that.
That's it? Okay.
Renee?
Yeah, I have two. One actually is for later, but I have a proclamation, a draft proclamation recognizing December 6th as Abolition Day, and this is part of some of the work that's being done by the Frederick Douglass Bicentennial Committee. So I just want to submit this now so that we can get on the calendar later in November. And the other one is a request, and I should have brought this up a couple weeks ago, but in going to various meetings, I noticed that sometimes we have maps that are inconsistent. We were looking at something on economic development, which was different from what we had voted on or had approved some time ago. So it'd be good if we could, if planning could provide, for example, in this case was planning had provided maps for the economic development SWOT analysis that was different. And if we could be consistent, it would be helpful.
Okay, we'll follow up on that generally on
Yeah.
just making sure we have the most current information and all that. Thank you. Did you have something else, Renee?
No, that's it.
Barry, are you ready?
Yeah, having trouble with my county email. A few things. One is I attended, as did Commissioner Price, a Greenway conference Sunday, and they not only are they very enthusiastic, and not only did I not realize that this Greenway group is from Durham and they are 25 years old, but they were also talking about the economic benefits of greenways and open space, and they're releasing a report this week. And I was talking to somebody from the Virginia Department of Recreation and Open Space who said the ratio of spending to return was 60-1. So if I get that report, which was promised to us, I'll pass it around, but that's a quite stunning number. And I talked to them a little bit about the notion that people had brought to our last meeting about the Mountain to Sea Trail, about the possibility of a more urban trail and how that would fit in with what they're doing. Also went to a housing event last night where there were several different presenters in Chapel Hill, and yet another idea that we haven't really talked about was raised, and so I'm looking forward to having that conversation when we get back to our criteria. And then yesterday, during the day, Commissioner Rich, Commissioner Markopoulos, and I met with staff, and we talked about how Orange County develops its MPO transportation priorities, how that process works, how we could help staff that are on the technical committee, and how we can start working together better to anticipate dates, deadlines. We have an item on our agenda tonight. So that going forward, there's more of a structure that the commissioners understand. And we even talked about having a separate list for spot safety projects, so that if citizens or members of this board identify specific areas where there are safety concerns, that those can be brought more in a more coordinated fashion to the attention of DOT. And then finally, next Monday, there's a meeting in response to a petition from Commissioner Markopoulos that I supported to start talking about the joint planning agreement being 30 years old. We still haven't heard from the planners from Chapel Hill or Carborough, or we don't know if they got permission. I know one of them said he'd very much like to be there. We got Roger Walden, who was Chapel Hill's planning director when the joint planning agreement was formed, and Dave Stansel and Craig Benedict are also going to be there, and Sally Green from Chapel Hill. And so we're just going to talk about, as we had said, how we got it, how it's worked, what its benefits are. And we'll, of course, be reporting back to this board. We hope to meet at least twice before the Assembly of Governments meeting and see if it's appropriate to have it on that meeting. And either way, try and keep this short.
All right, thank you. There's a lot going on, as always. All right. With that, we'll move on to proclamations, resolutions, and special presentations. We have one item under this part of our agenda. It is the endorsement of proposed National Register of Historic Places nomination for the Eflin Home. And Pete Sandback is here to make a presentation. The board will consider the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendation that the historic property known as the Eflin Home be submitted for listing in the National Register of Historic Places, and to authorize the chair to sign the attached elected official comment. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Always a pleasure to be here, and everybody who's heard me before knows this is my chance to give the history lesson of local interest. So tonight is a fascinating program and project, really. Have you had a chance to at least skim? It was a lot. I'm sorry I sent you so much, but we don't get things of kind of this historic importance and significance very often, and it was kind of an accidental find. Some graduate students were studying how the state handled its African-American female detention facilities in the early 20th century, Duke graduate students, and they kept hearing people talk about the Eflin Home. There was a prison in Eflin somewhere. It was a lockup place, a detention center. And they're like, what was this? So anyway, it turned out that as we did more research and found out more about it, thanks to those graduate students, we learned we had a fascinating historic resource right here that we knew nothing about until 2014. So anyway, let me tell you first, I'm here thanking you for the time on behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I'm here, because it's a legal process that the state requires us to go through. And the Preservation Commission partnered with our Lands Legacy program within DEEPR to help get some funding to do this National Register nomination. You have to hire a consultant to perform the research and write the report, which you saw. And then at its regular meeting on September 27th, the Preservation Commission held a required public hearing to take public comment, and then endorsed the proposed nomination. I think a letter was included in your package from Chair Dickinson about that. Your review and endorsement is needed because Orange County participates in a national program called the Certified Local Government Program, which is run by the National Park Service and each state. The National Park Service also manages the National Register Program, and through that program, if Orange County behaves well and certifies that it's done all the things it's supposed to do and does a report every year, we get to receive grants from the State Historic Preservation Office for preservation activities. And over the years, since 1993 when we started, we've received over $100,000 from the state for preservation activities, so we're excited about that. A reminder, the National Register is an honorary designation that carries no local regulatory burden, but does provide federal and state protection through a process that requires review of projects using federal or state funds or federal or state permits. So if a wetland project involves an Army Corps of Engineers permit and National Register property is on the map, they got to consider the impact of that project. Same with a pipeline, a highway, cell tower, anything else. So this is a protection action, even though it's an honorary designation in many ways, it does provide protection. The image you're looking at shows the Eflin Home as it looked about 1925 when it was completed, and it was called the North Carolina Industrial Home for Colored Girls. And the story of this is about how the statewide African-American community rallied to do something that the state itself failed to do. They would not provide a proper juvenile facility for girls. They had just barely covered the problem for African-American male youth by that date. And then in the early 1920s, Charlotte Hawkins Brown, or most of you have heard of, the noted educator who started the Palmer Institute in Sedalia, gathered the whole statewide North Carolina Federation of Colored Women's Clubs to raise money. And the women's clubs, each of them did bake sales and everything else, raised money, and also got donors, white donors, northern philanthropists, wherever they could find money, to raise enough to build the first piece of a complex. About 143 acres. They wanted to have a whole series of cottages to accommodate maybe 100 girls. They only got the first cottage built. This is the one they have, sadly. Let's see if you can see the next image here. And I think I included this in your package, the brochure that they put out about 1930, kind of talks about what they were trying to do and how they were trying to do it. It struggled because of the Depression. They had a hard time keeping the institute funded. They didn't realize that you could bring girls in who were, wayward girls, whatever you want to call them, delinquent. They could escape. And they had a problem, perception. Were they a lockup facility? Were they a reform school? And they really struggled with that throughout their history. And they ended up having to close in 1939. But despite the closure, the story of their struggle, the lobbying by Charlotte Hawkins Brown, she badgers the legislature all the time, got it on the radar of the state legislature. And in 1944, they established a North Carolina Industrial School for Negro girls in Rocky Mount, and it moved to Kinston, and today it still operates as the Dobbs Home in Kinston. And kind of a nice bookend to the whole thing. When they sold the Efland Home property in 1957, they got $12,000, which they donated to the Dobbs School to help build a new chapel in kind of honor of the Efland Home and all the people who helped make that happen. And here's some of the girls. And you could tell it was really a struggle the whole time when you read the minutes of their meetings. It was very hard to keep the kids there and hard to keep the money coming in. So here's the building today. It's been a private residence since 1957, and the owners are very interested in preserving it and keeping it protected in the future. Some of you may remember when the solar farm was built next door to it, there was an issue with the owners not really being consulted or knowing about the zoning situation there. And if it had been on the National Register at that time, it probably would have made it much more difficult to build a solar farm as close to this property as they did. So hopefully we can protect the site in the future. The HPC asks you to express your support and to authorize the chair to sign the letter of support so that we can forward that to the state. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Barry?
I thought we did know it was there when the solar installation, I wouldn't glorify it by calling it a farm, came before us.
Yeah, we knew it was there, but it wasn't on the National Register. And the law, the federal law only protects it once it's on the National Register. It's an official process, and it stinks, actually, but
Thanks.
now we know.
Yeah.
Other questions? So I have just one. What about us getting one of those nice historical markers for this property?
And I've talked to the owners about that, and I've also asked them if they wish to be a county landmark, which would give them a property tax benefit and some additional protection. And they're a little shy of taking that step, and they have a little bit of a problem with vandalism and trespassing in this kind of isolated setting. And they're thinking about a marker. I think it's a great idea, because I think we want to make sure it's remembered and it's known. And I think sometimes you can put a marker out on 70, which would be just far enough away, and just say it's nearby. You don't have to say where it is, and it would be hard for anybody to figure out how to get there if they just saw the marker out on 70. So I'd love to pursue that too, if the owners are willing.
So do we need the owner's authority if we want to put it out on 70?
No, I think more, you don't want to do it over their objection, I
Right.
guess would be my.
Well, I'd like to encourage us to pursue that and have a sign, one of those historical markers. So, so at least, consult with the owners with the idea of having it out on 70 where people will see it.
And the Historic Preservation Commission has actually been working on bringing to you a proposal to set up a county local marker system, because the state won't mark a lot of things that we wish to mark here in the county, and we think it would be a great way to help people remember communities and sites that aren't of statewide significance necessarily. This is, but this could get a state highway marker.
I think it's a great idea. Renee?
I think it's hidden enough that we might be able to convince them, but I do know that they have reservations about being out in the open. but if you're not looking, it's, I mean, my friend lives right across the street, and well, either of them, it's hard to see the houses from the street, but maybe just a marker that says, this is, stood, like a quarter of a mile from whatever, or maybe near where the farm was, more of the farmland.
Yeah. Okay,
And by
I
the way,
like that.
I want to just thank you for pursuing this, because actually it wasn't that unknown. People in Eflin, they've known about this for years. In fact, folks that are in their 90s, they're still telling stories about what happened over there, and the teachers have stayed at their homes and whatnot. It's just that now, we're doing something about it, so thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we're asked to, the ask tonight is to endorse the nomination and authorize the chair to sign the elected official comment letter, which is at attachment 4.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have one question.
Oh, go ahead. Come on back. We have one more question.
Could you address the definition of delinquent at the time?
I think they tended to use the term, it was a euphemism and delicately phrased. Wayward was another term, and girls of whose moral standards had been lowered by disreputable men in the community. And when you read all the different descriptions of it, that's the general drift of it. And they were deemed kind of a menace to the local community. And the judge would say, we got to do something with this kid. And the community said that you can't, there's nowhere to send the girl. There was no facility to put girls who were locked up for delinquency of some kind. It was a real problem.
So when we think of delinquents, we think of lawbreakers who are minors. And
These were under 16 was the age that they were
Right, but
talking
they weren't
about.
breaking the law. They were violating people's sense of morality.
Thank you. Yeah, that's well put.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So before we go on to the next item, which would be item 6A on our regular agenda, our friend Commissioner McKee has arrived. And Earl, I want to give you a chance if you had any announcements or petitions or comments since you came in after we had that.
I'm good.
Okay. All right, then. We will proceed to the regular agenda, item 6A. Item 6A is the interlocal agreement between Orange County and the town of Hillsborough for construction and operation of water and sewer facilities in the Hillsborough Area Economic Development District of Orange County. The board will review and consider approving the interlocal agreement with the town of Hillsborough that sets forth the conditions of utility installation and operation with associated land use consistency with prior cooperative planning efforts, and authorize the chair to sign. Craig Benedict will make the presentation. Is he here? I'm just joking. Here you are.
Was that my long sentence that I had? I apologize. Good evening, Craig Benedict, Orange County Plan Director. This item has been a project working with the county attorney, working with the town of Hillsborough staff, working with the deputy county manager here to bring forth this interlocal agreement that has to do with Orange County constructing utilities in the southwest quadrant of the I-40, Old 86, also known as Turton Street interchange. And we had this in front of you in May of this year, May 2nd, and the board approved it. We subsequently, it went to the town of Hillsborough. They wanted to add some language in there to add some specificity about having it be consistent with our joint plan, which was the intent originally. But working with both attorneys, we came up with some language that was satisfactory to everyone, at least at that time. So the addition of the changes included being very specific that this has to do with non-residential development. This is in the southwest quadrant, completely non-residential. There is a capacity determination, which we had an allocation for this area. That was in the original agreement in May. It's 108,000 gallons. That's what they can reserve, assign to this general area. And the agreement lasts for 5 years, and of course, we can increase the time as necessary. With this, this area does not include, you may remember back in May and June also, we were considering expanding the water and sewer boundary agreement. The county commission did approve the expansion of the water and sewer boundary contingent upon Hillsborough's approval. They haven't got to that item yet. This does not affect, this does not include a larger area. This is the existing area. At such time that Hillsborough considers enlarging the water and sewer boundary consistent with what we've done already and the other signatories to the agreement in the county, we can come back and amend this and have a larger area that can be serviced by our future utilities, again, most likely in that non-residential context. So one other additional part of this agreement, this does not mandate annexation into Hillsborough, but a property owner that does want water and sewer agreement would sign a voluntary annexation agreement to be acted upon by Hillsborough at such time, in the future. And this is similar to what we do in some other areas where we have interlocal agreements for utility expansion. So I think that covers the new parts of the agreement. Hillsborough did approve this on September 25th, and it is completely consistent with the agreement that you looked at in May of this area. So staff and the manager recommend proceeding with consideration of the board for approval of this interlocal agreement.
All right, are there questions? Penny?
So you just said that if someone wanted to hook onto the water and sewer, they would have to be annexed? Do they have
No,
to?
they
the
would only
property
have
has
to be a
annexed?
voluntary annexation agreement, which is just a document that they sign that doesn't cause the process to begin, but Hillsborough would have it in hand, and at such time in the future, they could, then Hillsborough, having this voluntary annexation agreement in hand, could act upon it, and then it would be annexed into the area.
And where else do we, can we follow up?
Yes, of
Where-
course,
Where
go
else
ahead.
where else does that happen?
That would
What other
also be,
parts of
yeah, this would also be in the Eno Economic Development Zone, and also in the Mebane, annexation zone. It does not, there's not a requirement for annexation. For example, Mebane has said you can develop all the properties under Orange County zoning and building processes, and when it gets complete, they might annex it at that time. With the situation with Mebane, if it's an economic development project, typically they're a partner with us and offering an incentive, so annexation is usually sooner than later with the Mebane situation. But in Hillsborough, if Hillsborough does not want to offer incentives, then they don't really have to annex and be, in partnership with the incentive program that the county has.
Thank you.
Other questions? No other questions? Any comments? So this, I have one question. So this was approved by Hillsborough last week, is that right?
Last Monday.
Okay, any discussion? So this came up, this is not the first time it's been before us. There were current concerns that were raised about the Wasamba line and the rural buffer line. I just want to make sure everyone's concerns, everyone feels that their concerns have been appropriately addressed by these changes. And I think that, I had a nice conversation with Tom Stevens about it before Hillsborough voted, and, they're certainly excited to see this move forward and really, hope to see that the area be, have industrial development and not, get caught up in residential. So, and I think that's a goal that we all share. Earl?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the manager's recommendation.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the manager's recommendation, which was to approve and sign the interlocal agreement. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Thank you. Next item, 6B, expansion of the role of the Home Program Review Committee and renaming the committee the Orange County Local Government Affordable Housing Collective, or OCC-Oct. We should come up with a better acronym if we can. The board will review and consider an expanded scope of the Home Program Review Committee. Home was so nice. The expanded scope will allow for broader discussions about, as well as seek collaborative solutions to, affordable housing issues in the county. In addition, the expansion serves a response to community input shared during the discussions on the 2016 Affordable Housing Bond as it relates to intergovernmental collaboration. And our Director of Housing, Cheryl Hampton, is here to make a presentation.
Yes, good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and my colleagues in management that's in the room. Not going to read all of this to you, but you have the PowerPoint there with you. And Tom, I think I need a little help because I'm trying to turn the page on this. It's not moving. Up or down? We have two decision points before us and in the resolution. Some background, the county has been receiving home funds since 1995 or earlier. We've received over $11.5 million. The decision points are twofold this evening. One, if you approve it, it will expand the role of this committee to be able to have broader discussion, to strategize, maximize resources. It really is an amalgamation of thinking and thoughts and input from not only staff and our management, but this body and other local elected officials, as well as our residents. So the two decisions are the approval of the resolution, along with, which would grant approval to the role, to expand the role of the committee, as well as to rename the committee. You see the background. As I said, we began receiving funds in the early 90s, received to date a little over $11.5 million. We formed the consortium. All of our local jurisdictions and the county are included in that consortium. We're members. And how did this come about? Besides just recent conversations between staff and management and elected officials, but the actual program committee came about in 2000 when elected officials were added to the body. The initiative and the consortium would take place between management and staff. And then in 2000, elected officials began participating in the process, and each of the participating jurisdictions make an appointment to the consortium. The current function is to provide guidance and oversight, particularly around 2 points as you see in the PowerPoint there, to recommend priorities and criteria and to annually evaluate. And so the resolution would enhance that, working with my staff and I, because the county serves as the administrator for these funds and functions as that. So it will expand not only the current, but will broaden that discussion. Rationale, we've received input from citizens during the 2016 bond discussions around the bond before it was passed, and they wanted to see more collaboration between the units of local government and the county. They wanted us to ensure maximizing or maximization of the resources and coming together around the creation of strategies and solutions for our affordable housing issues. So also at a recent Assembly of Governments, we heard from, staff heard from a number of the elected officials that they wanted to use the program review committee as a vehicle to have broader discussions around affordable housing issues. So up for recommendation is the approval of the resolution, which calls for the expansion of the role of this committee, and given that expansion, the renaming of the committee. So I'll stop now and see if there are any questions.
Are there questions? Renee?
Yeah, I have two concerns. Since this is a consortium and you're working with, and Chapel Hill is involved in this, I'm wondering if we could also, if the consortium could also review the CDBG funds. I know that Chapel Hill is, administers those funds, but you can use both home and CDBG in the same project. So I'm wondering, would it make sense to try to do that as well?
I think it would be included in those broader discussions, and we can
Okay.
take that back, most certainly. But I think in the broader discussion, as we look at maximizing resources, every pot of money that we have and planning around that strategically should come up.
Yeah, and at this point, I don't think we've, at least not recently, we haven't used a Section 108 loan guarantee, but if for some reason we did, to review that as well, since they can be used on the same project.
Yes. And I would like to point out, each of the participating jurisdictions have a similar resolution that they are bringing before their body for consideration for approval.
And the other thing in the, it was in the list of things that you would do, I would ask that you also compile data on the amount of local and other dollars that are leveraged
Okay.
when you use, when we're using the federal dollars, because I know that's what they want to hear in DC
Yes.
or in Congress.
Other comments or questions? So I have just a couple. One, can you just remind everybody, so the committee right now is staffed by Orange County Department of Housing,
Yes, sir.
and it's got one representative from the county, from Hillsborough, from Carrboro, and Chapel Hill. Is that right?
It has one elected official. For Carrboro, it's vacant right now, but the assistant to the town manager from a staff role participates. Chapel Hill has the mayor pro tem, along with Hillsborough. Their mayor pro tem participates. Lauren Clark, executive director of housing and community development for the town of Chapel Hill as staff. Ms. Margaret Howe as the planning director and assistant town manager as staff for Hillsborough. And I, along, sometimes before my tenure began, the county manager, but I, along with you, Mr. Chair.
But the four elected officials are the voting members? Is that right? Or is all those people you just named?
I believe all of these folk vote. I have not seen it distinguished, and that's something the committee can, as it's expanded, can work on that. We're going to have to go in and, given the broader discussion, revise it, but I can get back with that information for you. Right now, I'm not sure. I know recommendations are made by staff, and the committee votes.
So, okay, well, and then then each of the boards have to vote to
yes.
approve the thing.
Yes, sir.
So I'll just, this is more of a comment now, as the representative, I think this is a great idea. I think that that consortium has a lot of information that's underutilized. It doesn't, and we've talked about trying to more effectively coordinate both not just the funding, but just projects and what's happening and maximizing efforts. So I think this is a sort of a structure that's already in place to do that. And I think, defining more specifically what we want it to do will be really good. So I think this is an important step. I spoke to one of our colleagues in Carrboro about the possibility of adding somebody from OWASA, a board member and an OWASA staff person, because I think OWASA plays a huge role in affordable housing, and we've been talking about that. So I'd like to suggest that to the group, to our group, to consider making that request. And some of you have been on the OWASA board, but I feel like that's a constant, issue that, the whole issue of access to water is one that comes up repeatedly when we're talking about affordable housing. And certainly those costs are prohibitive. And, I think if there's an opportunity to begin to start some discussions about how we can address that, they should be part of this. These discussions should also be happening among this consortium or committee or whatever it's going to be called now. Renee
Well,
and Mark?
No, well, he hasn't spoken.
Well, you were recognized, and
Okay.
he'll get his
So,
turn.
Yeah, so I would agree with that, and particularly if you're also looking at CDBG, because those monies can be used for water and sewer projects, so it makes sense to, if we're going to be looking at things comprehensively, to actually include them. My other question, though, would be, what about Hillsborough? Would we want to include the Hillsborough water and sewer, whatever they are, agency?
Well,
What are they
isn't
called?
that agency controlled by the town?
Yeah,
So,
it
I
is.
mean, having the town represented,
that's-
it seems
okay,
like
that's
that
enough,
would
that's
be
fine.
sufficient.
Okay.
That's my sense.
Okay.
Mark?
But anyway, I agree with OWASA.
So my question is would we be saying we want an OWASA representative, or would we be saying we'd like to ask OWASA to consider if they would like to be part of this?
Well, I mean, I don't think we can force them to do
No.
anything, but yeah, I mean,
So what we're doing is asking them if they, would they consider being part of this effort?
well, I would ask it the other way. I would say, we want you to be part of this, and then, but I'm open to whatever approach seems to make the most sense. Barry?
Well, I think the thrust I take from Commissioner Markopoulos' question is that rather than force OWASA into a position that it was repeatedly resisted, we invite OWASA to participate. And if they choose to do so, I think that would be great. And they have struggled from time to time with figuring out how to be more responsive to affordable housing concerns. But at least their perspective is their hands are tied. We may not agree, but that's their position, so they may choose not to participate. And Hillsborough supplements its tax rate with its water. So it's
Oh, you don't have to tell me about
intertwined.
that.
Yeah, so it's intertwined with being
Yeah.
the Hillsborough elected officials.
Although I would add that lately OWASA has been working on some efforts in terms of water efficiency, that they have focused the outreach on that to lower income people. So they're into it a little bit, but I think it'd be a good idea to just sort of ask them if they would like to be part of it, and of course tell them we'd like them to be.
One way to address that might be to invite them to come present, even if they don't want to be full members, and they could talk about their differential rates, and they could talk about the new program that they're just putting into place that they sent this information about.
Other comments? So, it sounds like, at least on this side of the dais, there's emerging consensus to at least invite them to be part of this. Not hearing any opposition to that. So, Cheryl, if we want to do that, how would you recommend we proceed? We could approve this resolution and ask that you go back to the other boards that are considering it and see how they feel. I could send them a letter. What is your sense on how, if we want to make this invitation, what is your best sense on how to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we go back, the staff go back and speak with other staff, but also that you send a letter to the other elected officials asking to expand the committee to include OWASA, or at least extend an invitation to participate as a part of the committee. And then if that is denied, we would make sure that periodically, from the administrator's standpoint, if they do deny a position on the new collaborative or new entity, we would make sure periodically that we would have an update or invite them to present as it relates to water and sewer and infrastructure needs.
That sounds great. So,
Chair, I believe the manager.
yes.
I would echo what Cheryl said, but I would also add, tomorrow morning, we have a meeting with the affordable housing staff and managers of the jurisdictions, and so we will bring this back tomorrow morning and talk with staff and the managers about this additional request, but I would recommend that you all go ahead and approve it, and then we'll work on it as staff to bring OWASA in.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? So we've got a resolution in front of us to approve, and then we could do that, and then we could just, do you need a specific instruction beyond what we've already said?
No, I think that the other jurisdictions would agree with that request.
All right, then. So is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved. Good idea.
Second.
What about the CDBG and the leveraging?
There's a friendly amendment here. Go ahead, add it.
That the consortium also look at CDBG program funding
Yes.
and also keep track of leveraging as part of the charge.
Yes.
I thought that was, you said you were going to bring that up at a meeting for subjects. So does that really need to be in the amendment?
No,
If you look on the resolution, you will see one of the bullets talks about the overall, not only administration of home funds, but it talks about resources, policy changes, all of those kinds of things. And when we tell the story, staff and I, as the housing housing department here, knows that that is something that you want to see regularly in the report. So we will capture that information. But if you would like to make it a part of the resolution, I don't think you have to, but I think we need to note it, and we need to bring it back at our meeting tomorrow.
Well, the reason that I would suggest adding it is because Chapel Hill actually oversees the CDBG money. But I'm thinking that, yeah, for the county, but since it is a consortium and they're at the table anyway,
Okay.
you know, if it would be okay with them.
Madam Chair,
comfortable with that.
One point of clarification, the county does not receive CDBG funds. Chapel Hill receives it for its jurisdiction and any of the extending areas that it
Right,
has.
that's what I was saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, what if we just change the second bullet under guidance, or, actually, that's, what if it said, provide guidance on administration of the home program activities and other affordable housing resources in the county? So we can just capture everything. Would that cover it? I mean, because there's other things that you mentioned too, and so I don't want to, I think.
That'll be fine.
So I will withdraw my preceding motion. And I will make a motion, if that's all right with the seconder.
Sure.
I'll make a motion for approval with the additional wording as just stated by the chair for the bullet, wherever it was, provide guidance on home program activities and
Other resources.
other resources in the county.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded with that slight amendment. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioners, and Commissioner Price, we'll make sure that
Okay.
CDBG is spelled out clearly,
Okay.
as well as leverage amounts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again.
All right, next up is item 6C, which is the Durham Chapel Hill Carrboro Metropolitan Planning Organization 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Alternatives Analysis. The board will receive a presentation from the Durham Chapel Hill Carrboro Metropolitan Planning Organization staff on the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Alternatives Analysis and consider potentially endorsing comments from the Orange Unified Transportation Board. Craig Benedict is back, and is Andy Henry here too to help with your presentation? Excellent.
Yes.
All right.
Good evening, Craig Benedict there, besides Andy Henry from the Durham Chapel Hill Carrboro MPO. We also have Tom Maltieri, Comprehensive Planner. And I'd like to introduce one other new person, our new hire, Transportation Planner, Nish Trivedi. He is filling Max's position and serves as strong staff support with MPOs, both Durham, Chapel Hill, Burlington Graham, and works with other staff on our rural planning organization. So we're glad to have him here. You heard a little introduction from Commissioner Jacobs during his commission communications that we were able to meet yesterday about a comprehensive look of how transportation projects are brought forward. And so as a precursor to Andy getting up and I wouldn't say he's necessarily going to get in the weeds of how a MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, is approved and processed. I'm just going to give you a brief overview. I expect that in the coming months we'll have a more elaborate discussion where there's time to talk about at what points in the process can new projects be forward, how can we strategize to improve the scoring of our projects.
One
So-
request, please?
Yeah.
Can you, when you say the acronyms, if you could make sure what you did just now to make sure so everybody understands what you're saying, just spell it out, maybe just the first 5 or 6 times. After that, hopefully everyone will catch on.
People may have heard of STI, Strategic Transportation Investments, was a new bill by our legislature in 2013 and our prior governor that created a program of scoring projects, a very mathematical scoring, data-driven process that to spread monies for both transportation projects, transit projects, and bike and ped projects to a lesser degree throughout the entire state based on some formulas. This was radical and new. I was implemented through a SPOT process, which stands for Strategic Prioritization Office for Transportation. So you'll hear and you'll see in the next slide that when we mention SPOT, we're not calling our dog. We're talking about different 10-year implementation periods where we evaluate a host of projects specific to our MPO. We have this process every 2 years. The federal government only requires every 4 years, but we have a 2-year cycle. What happens with a 2-year cycle, there's somewhat of an overlap, which can be complicating to both the public and to elected officials, because we're just about finishing up on one project and we're starting a new cycle, and some of them feed back into it. Every 2 years, they call it a different project. It started off, had a 2.0 project. That was the 2014 to 2023 period. We almost have adopted the SPOT 4.0, which is a 2018 to 2027 period. And we are beginning a process of 5.0, which is a different funding cycle. The item that's on later tonight, the MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, you have to have projects within that master plan. It's a very worldly, comprehensive plan of everything that you could imagine over the next 40 or 50 years in order for it to end up in the SPOT program. So the MTP, Andy Henry will explain how that is developed. The SPOT process is 100% data-driven at the state and regional level. There's over 80 criteria about congestion and a variety of congestion and safety, but not subjective at all. Division points, which is what we are more in tune with through our MPO and Division 7 with DOT, we get to assign up to 50 points. Part of them are data-driven, and some of those are more subjective. But as you can see, the vast majority of points are data-driven, so it's hard to shuffle these points around too much. This is a slide that I absconded from Andy's presentation. This is how you develop that MTP process, and part of that MTP process he'll get into more is where the commission has expressed some interest in the past, as well as our planning board, to take a look at item number 2. Well, let's go with item number 1, the goals and objectives. If we want to have a community that is more bike and ped friendly and more transit oriented, then you can put them in the goals and objectives. And as you evaluate these alternatives that come up, you can put an emphasis on one area or the next. Socioeconomic data. Every 4 years, the MTP that we're working on now is the 2045 MTP, and we have worked on 2035, 2040, and 2045. These population employment forecasts, we have spent more time in this cycle than we had in previous cycles. And you'll see the slide that comes up next, how those projections have compared over the years with population employment. I guess anecdotally, I think there's maybe a little more work that can be done in that area because you'll be looking at sheer numbers of people and numbers of employees, and what we want to bring it down to is how much square footage would have to be developed to accommodate that amount of employees, and how much new construction, how many houses of either single family or multifamily. We're changing some of our assumptions in this cycle, understanding that in a lot of our urban areas, we're likely to see more multifamily than we had in previous iterations of this. Andy will go through deficiency analysis and alternatives analysis. This was the Orange County population employment projections. The area that's shown in green was what we were expecting in 2035, and it was initiated from 2005. That's where we used some of the projections from the state. You see under the population area, let's see if this shows up. Under the population area, the trend line that we had here is very close to the 2045. The 2040 projection was a little bit higher than that. We brought it back down to what we were seeing in the 2035 forecast. Maybe some additional differences on the employment projections. They've been very flat in this period here, probably due to the recession. So you see, since our launching point in the 2045 is at a more conservative level, we've also taken a look at the type of employment growth in the future. But this is appreciably different. From 2040, MTP had an increase in about 49,000 new employees over that 30-year period, probably down in this 2045 forecast, we're probably closer to 40,000, maybe 43,000. But still, that's a big number considering we only have 66,000 employees in the county now. This I don't expect to drill down into, but I just wanted to try to give you an idea of what the alternatives analysis involves. And I don't know if you can see this maybe in the handout in front of you. There will be 4 different scenarios of investment. Some highway, some moderate MTP work, aspirational, or as the MPO board was saying the other day, maybe optimistic, and then optimistic with a strong transit emphasis. Well, with each one of these, let's go back, it evaluates using a regional model of how long it would take to get from Hillsborough to Durham. Under present 2013 baseline conditions, it would be 18 minutes. If we invest with a moderate highway scenario, it'd be 23 minutes. And this regional model takes a look at all of these different scenarios to stay in the same area. If we invest a different way, not too much of a change, 18 to 23 minutes over those 30 years. Aspirational, we're 18 up to 22 minutes, not much of a change. And with Hillsborough to Durham, 21 minutes. So you can take a look at how your investments, depending on what type of scenario you're looking at, how it affects travel times between these areas. So we know that with the population growth, the employment growth in the area, the time it takes to get between places are going to increase. So even though we'll be investing billions of dollars over those 30 years with a variety of projects in our our 3 or 4 county region, still, there's going to be more traffic on the roads, and we are mitigating those increases that come from those areas. And, at another time, we can drill down a little bit more. There was a question as we were preparing this agenda by a variety of the commissioners, well, what new projects are, when you leave the SPOT 4.0 process and you begin the SPOT 5.0 process, how did the new projects get in there? So when you start a new process, the projects that are in the first 5 years automatically go into the next process. They're considered funded, they're considered, committed. The other ones that go into the program what was noted in the second 5 years. They are part of the development program. There might be right-of-way acquisition in those future years, or might be some design. It might not be funded for construction to even past 10 years. But they have to be rescored. So that's another part that goes into the program every 2 years since the other ones that go into the program is there may be projects that did not even make the first 10 years and had been identified. They were the ones that were either said unfunded or did not, meet any scoring threshold to get in that first 10 years. Those go into the program. Now, the people that have submitted those, they can be pulled out if they want. I mean, you could actually pull something out. And then there's a fourth category. There are new projects that had not been identified in any of these first 3 areas, or what we may be more involved in the future is how can we amend projects that have been submitted to have better scoring. Maybe a project was 6 miles long and involved 1 interchange. Can we pull the interchange out in a section of roadway, something like that? So I think we'll be doing more of a deep dive in how can we have projects in Orange County and its municipalities score better as we move forward in the future. In the agenda package, we might not, unless there's questions, in attachment 2, I believe, that gives a variety of projects out to like 2065 and things like that. You may see something in that unfunded category that you say, well, I think we should have that before 2026 or 2028, and that's the input that we will be looking for over time. This is just a snapshot of how a specific project has a first 5 year of the funding program and a second part of the development program. I'm not going to go through these, but this is just for your information in the process about where we are and how there's opportunities for input. I think with the big section up here, how the local government decisions plug into MPO staff technical committees before it gets to the board, I think that's a very critical period, which we're going to study and how we can be more effective in that area. This is SPOT 5.0 score, and you see we're starting to look at what there had been in the past, in the summer of this year, and what comes out the other end with the Board of Transportation vote will not be to summer 2019. And then that project goes on up to 2028, or it becomes the 2020 to 2029 program. Last slide. Not to get into this either, this is part of Andy's presentation also, but it goes around in a circle. There's a variety of public input periods, and a large portion of this project will be after the scoring occurs or our points are added to a project at a certain point. A lot of it ends up in the hands of NCDOT with their scoring process, and they actually have a staff that does this spot scoring, and then comes back again, probably a year and a half from now. I think that's it. If you have any questions about what I said, please feel free, or we can move on to Andy Henry's presentation, and you can see if there's questions at the end.
Are there questions for Craig? So I have one, and maybe it's not for you, and maybe it was just as a framing question that Andy can address in his presentation. transportation. So, you know, it would be good to, I mean, this was good, but it's, you know, I think we need even more basic primer. So, and I know that sounds like what Barry's talking about working on, but, you know, basically, all this whole process is to try to get projects funded by DOT, right?
Yes.
And the county doesn't build roads and we don't put any of our own money into any of these projects. We hope that they get funded through this or nothing happens.
We could, for some bike and ped projects, we could contribute 20%. That might accelerate some projects in that avenue. Some of those data-driven scoring criteria can involve if a local government, even a county, can acquire right-of-way or help with design work. Sometimes those are some of the criteria that helps the scoring. So yeah, we're not as actively involved in cities that, you know, build roads or developers that build roads, but there is a way of getting projects that we think should be prioritized to somehow shift that forward a little bit.
So our options, that's what I wanted just to get to. So our options to get things we want done is either take whatever steps we can to enhance their scores through this process,
Correct.
or fund them ourselves. If we decided we really want to build a sidewalk in front of the Sportsplex, I know that's in Hillsborough, but just let's say it wasn't, and we said we really want to build a sidewalk to get built. We could say, well, we could try to, maybe, you know, maybe we could have a bike ped path through this process and try to boost our score, or the commissioners could come out of pocket and say, we're going to pay to build it, or we're going to try to find public-private or partner with the towns. I mean, you know, I just want to get a sense of how, you know, what our options are realistically. And so, and then how realistic it is, you know, obviously the idea of getting the state transportation money to pay for it is preferable. But I also would like some sense of how likely is it we could boost the score in any significant way that would make a difference.
Yeah.
So that's a framing question. That's sort of the opening statement. And I know Barry had his hand up, and I don't know if anybody else did, but.
Well, we did talk about specifically sidewalks and pedestrian access, and whether there was something that we wanted to talk about as part of the budget process to set aside the matching funds. But a lot of the, as you mentioned, a lot of the possibilities are not in our jurisdiction. And then DOT has their ridiculous policy that they will not allow a sidewalk in their right-of-way in rural areas, and they won't maintain it. So, you know, there are some things that maybe we need to write to. We have Department of Transportation board members at the MPO meetings, and we brought it up at the last Durham Chapel Hill MPO meeting about the sidewalks, but we don't have a policy about sidewalks at all. Everything's ad hoc. If a developer is requested or citizens would like to see a sidewalk, that we don't have a policy. So we talked about how we need to get to that place, and we also talked about this list of projects that are not high in the queue, and we talked about looking at county plans over the last 10 or 15 years that propose transportation improvements that have totally fallen off the radar, and spend some time over the next year to see what those were and whether or not we want to elevate them to a different level of concern and appreciation. And then there was a general sense that Orange County's getting the short end of the stick at both MPOs. And we heard anecdotally from staff at the TARPO as well. And we want to change that. It may not be anybody's fault, but we either, for whatever reasons, whether it's we're not very aggressive, we don't understand very well, or we're the little guy, we need to do a better job. And so that's part of what we wanted to work on.
Any, then Renee?
And I think that that answers, or it starts to answer some of the questions that you have about framework and how do we make our projects more attractive to moving to a better score. And that's kind of what the three of us were working on yesterday. So hopefully we'll be able to understand that a little bit better. So when we do move into the 5.0, that we'll fare a little bit better than the 4.0.
Renee?
Well, just a clarification with TARPO, gosh, I know Penny wants the acronyms, the Triangle.
Triangle Area.
Regional- Yeah, regional planning organization. There are 4 counties involved there, and there had been an agreement before I even got there that they would try to split it up, and so each county would get projects. We really try to work, in a sense of equity to try to make sure that every single county gets something. Now, what happened with this last round, this board only voted on to approve 2. Now, I wanted to get more projects on, but this board decided on the 2 that had scored the highest. And it also means working also with DOT staff, because the one on NC 54, going from Carborough to Alamance, Carborough, for example, didn't want that to be widened, so there was a whole thing with wording and falling in and out of the slot, and so it does take some finagling, but it also means looking at some of the criteria that the state looks at in order to bump the scores up, because as a local government, we don't, the way that SPOT and STIP and all of that are arranged, it's to give more weight to regional and the state preferences. But in the situation with 54, we worked with the MPO because one half of it, south of 54, is in TARPO, and north of 54 is the MPO. So we worked together to tell DOT what we wanted.
Barry?
When the rural planning organizations were formed, maybe 10 years ago, Orange County specifically decided not to let the Durham-Chapel Hill MPO take the entire county, because we felt like the rural interests would go to the bottom of the list. And so this way, in TARPO, we're actually the largest entity. And so we're more likely to get a fair shot. And then we're in the Burlington-Graham MPO because of the part of Mebane that sticks out into Orange County. And we're the smallest part in that MPO, but the entire population of the MPO is a little bit more than the population of Orange County alone. So it's not that big an MPO, relatively speaking. And we had to your point about sidewalks and greenways and all that, part of the conversation yesterday was, if you have partners like Hillsborough on a sidewalk, you move up, just like we've done with parks and tried to do with solid waste. The more partners, the more attractive. And so that's something that we need to work on once we know what our policy is.
Other comments at this point? All right, let's forge ahead.
Good evening. Andy Henry with the Durham-Chapel Hill Carborough Metropolitan Planning Organization, and my objective tonight is that you understand the MPO a little better. This might be a refresher for some of you, that you understand the role of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the MTP, and then provide any feedback that you want. And so we're responsible for the long-range transportation planning in all of Durham County, part of Orange County, as you heard a few minutes ago, and just the northeast corner of Chatham County. And it's a federal mandate. If you want to spend federal funding, you have to plan for, and you have to approve the use of the federal transportation funding through an MPO. We have a policy board. It's composed mostly of elected officials. So Commissioner Jacobs is your member there, and Commissioner Rich is the alternate. They're both active on the board. This is a map, and again, you can see the blue area is the MPO boundary, so you see all of Durham counties in there in part of Orange, and that part of Orange that isn't in the MPO to the west, that's part of the Triangle Area Rural Planning Organization, TARPO. And you can't see it here, but a little further west, as Commissioner Jacobs mentioned a few minutes ago, there's part of the Burlington-Graham MPO that comes in with Mebane into Orange County. And you can see again that little part of Chatham County there in the northeast. And basically all the urbanized area from the last census, at least all the urbanized area has to be in the MPO. And most of the funding that the MPO designates is done cooperatively with North Carolina Department of Transportation, NCDOT, and that's done through what we heard a few minutes ago, that one document, the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. But the MPO does have some discretionary funding too that it distributes out to the member jurisdictions and counties. And that's mostly used for bicycle pedestrian projects, by the way. Okay, so this is the planning framework, and I was here last January or February. We had our first comprehensive transportation plan, the MPO's first plan. That was adopted in May. It has a lot of projects in it, because if you can show a need for the project, we include it in the CTP. Orange County has a CTP as well, and we worked with staff to coordinate that. That next bubble, I guess you see coming down, that's what I'm talking about today, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. The reason it's smaller is because it has to be fiscally constrained. That means that you have to show that you have the revenues to cover the cost for your project. So that big bucket of projects we have for the CTP, that narrows significantly when we get down to the MTP. And the MTP is a federal requirement. The CTP is a state requirement. The dashed lines there that you see, that's what Craig was talking about a few minutes ago, the prioritization process, SPOT. And that is the gateway, I guess, into being funded. And right now, let me see. So the 2018-2027 Transportation Improvement Program was just approved by the state, I believe, in August, about a little over a month ago. And just a few days ago, September 30th, was the deadline for the MPO to submit their projects in the spot for the next TIP, which is almost 2 years away. So you can see, as Craig was talking about, you got this long cycle of going through and prioritizing these projects and submitting them. So the transportation plan, it's the list of the highway, transit, bicycle and pedestrian projects that we think will be needed to address the deficiencies through the year 2045. It has some assumptions, as Craig mentioned, again, the future land use. We have some guide totals about the population employment. We have a land use model that distributes that. Fiscal constraint, I already mentioned that. You have to have the revenues to cover the cost. Funding, projects have to be in the MTP in order to get back on the TIP. So here's the TIP again. The project has to be in the MTP in order to be considered in the TIP. So that's something that makes the MTP important. It can also be used for planning, for development review. You can use it to either dedicate or reserve right-of-way for future highways and fixed guideway projects. Now that we have the CTP, that the MTP is not so important. When I say we, now that the MPO has the CTP. Craig already talked about this. We started out with the goals and objectives a couple years ago. We created a land use model. It took a while. We did a deficiency analysis. That's where we take our 2045 population employment. We put it on the current network, the no-build scenario to see where the deficiencies are going to be. Then right now we're working on the alternatives, and I'll explain that a little bit in a few minutes. The preferred option is the next step. That's really just a draft plan. I hope to release that in October and come back and approve it in December, adopt the final MTP. I'm just going to jump ahead because I think this graphic here explains this a little better what the alternatives are. Basically, the alternatives, we're taking a land use scenario and we're joining it with a transportation network, and we run it through a travel demand model. It's called the Triangle Regional Model. So we have two land use scenarios. We have one called the Community Plan, and that's based on the local comprehensive transportation plans and any policies. And then we have a second one, which we called Aim High, and that puts more density and mixed use around the future transit stations. So two land use scenarios. We couple that or team it up with different transportation networks. One is a highway. It has a lot of highway projects in it, more so than we could actually afford. We have one at transit. Again, it has fewer highway projects, but it has a lot of transit projects. Then we have a moderate hybrid, and we pair those together to create our alternatives. One thing I'll say is when we come to our draft plan, we're not going to take one of our alternatives and just say, okay, alternative B was the best, we're going to put that out as a draft plan. We'll take projects from all the different alternatives. Land use, you saw this chart just a minute ago. Orange County, from 2013 to 2045, future population is going to be 194,000. We get that from Office of State Management and Budget. Employment, going from 64 to 107,000, that's a 68% increase. The population was a 40% increase, so you can see that the population the employment will continue to outpace the population growth. What information is available? There's a lot of information that compares the alternatives. You can get performance measures that show the average travel time, how many miles a day people travel, the different mode splits. You can get travel isochrones. You see that other map there. It looks like contour lines. That'll take a place like, say, downtown Chapel Hill, and in the afternoon peak time, it'll say how far you can get in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and 30 minutes. Travel time maps, you saw a few of those before. We also have travel corridors, so we take major travel corridors like I-40, I-85, NC-86, and we compare the travel time from one end to the other using the different scenarios. And then congestion maps. Here's an example of a congestion map. You've probably seen these before. Basically, what you're seeing is when you get to that orange color there, that means that the volume, the number of trips on it, are equal to the capacity, or it's higher. So it's reached capacity of the roadway. The red means that it's at 120% of capacity, so it's 20% over capacity. And what we mean by 100% capacity, this is called a level of service E. That's what our model is based on. So in transportation, I want to say jargon, but really the technical field of transportation, it's almost like school. It has A, B, C, D, E, and F level of service. A is free flow. F is, traffic is just crawling. So we're based on level of service C. So when you see that orange color, there's some pretty heavy congestion there already. The red color is very heavy. Now, this is the no-build scenario that I mentioned a few minutes earlier. That means we took the 2045 population employment and ran it in our model, and we had the current network on there. So you're seeing a lot of congestion on I-85, I-40, Fordham Boulevard, NC-54 between Durham and Chapel Hill, and then some of the other areas, NC-86 and Chapel Hill, and Churton Street, of course, through Hillsborough. Some of the key conclusions from the alternatives analysis, I already talked about the demographics. You'll continue to have growth in Orange County. The employers will continue to attract commuters to the county, employment here. The congestion box there, basically what I'm saying there is, when you look in the future, when you take today's congestion and you do the no-build alternative, you get a real high congestion value. And then when you put your alternatives into the model, your roadway, when you widen some of the major roadways, you put light rail, et cetera, and the congestion comes down, but it never returns very close to what it was in 2013. So even though we're putting a lot of highway and transit projects in there, we're still seeing a pretty high level of congestion in the future. We also saw that when we make investments in light rail and transit, those corridors and areas where we make that investment, we see a lot more bicycling and walking in the mode share. And also, I mentioned the second land use alternative, that aim high scenario. That one just produced a lot more bicycling and walking as a mode, and it also shortened improved a lot of the travel time, just because it had higher, more mixed use, especially around the light rail stations. This is just a sample of some of the projects that we're looking at in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Widening I-40 and improving some of the interchanges like NC 86. I-85 widening and improving some of the interchanges there. Again, at NC 86 and Churton Street. 15501 widening, really it's Fordham Boulevard. That could be a widening, or it could be super streets. They're still doing a feasibility study on that, and they're also looking at improving some of the intersections, and there is an interchange there with at Raleigh Road. NC 54 between Durham and Chapel Hill, possibly putting super streets in there and then some intersection improvements, and then widening South Churton Street. That's just a sample of some of the projects that we have in the MTP. Again, some samples of transit. Yeah, the Durham Orange Light Rail Transit from Chapel Hill Hospitals over to North Carolina Central University in Durham. Bus Rapid Transit, the north-south line corridor in Chapel Hill, starting in the New Banks Road, going by the hospitals and coming down to south. Forgetting the development south of on 15501.
Southern Village.
Southern Village, okay, thank you. Down to Southern Village. It also has expanded fixed route and express service, funding for those bus facilities and transit stops, and funding for park and ride lots, et cetera, in there for transit. And it's based on the Orange County Transit Plan that was adopted earlier this year. That's all the presentation that I have, but I can answer any questions or take any comments that you might have.
Any questions or comments at this time? All right, everyone's up to speed, all puns intended. So now, is there any discussion? We are asked to discuss as appropriate, and then there's a attachment 3 is comments from the Transportation Board, and we're asked to discuss those, either endorse them as written or modify as appropriate, as well as add any comments of our own. There's 6 bullet points in the Transportation Board's recommendation. We could start with that. Does anybody have any questions or comments on those? Yes, go ahead, Mark.
So the third one, the autonomous vehicles bullet point,
Yes.
I'm intrigued by this whole discussion of something we've never actually seen or have any ability to really understand. What does that mean? How would we be vigilant with regard to those advancements in technology?
Yeah, so there's 2 things you might hear. AV, autonomous vehicles, that means you don't have to drive the vehicle, it drives itself. And then you hear CV, that's vehicles that are communicating with one another. So if you're out in the interstate and your vehicle's communicating with the one in front of you, you can move within pretty close space to it and it, be in a high speed, 65, 70 miles an hour. There are technologies that are coming. I think this comment is just asking that we're cognizant of that, and we don't have that type of, we don't account for that technology in the way we model right now, because first of all, we're not quite sure what the impacts will be. We're not sure if autonomous vehicles will make urban areas more dense, because you need to be in a denser environment to take advantage of vehicles that drive themselves, or people would live further away, because that 20-minute commute's not so bad now that I can live further out, do a 45-minute commute, and do work while I'm in my commute. So we're not sure about the impact. So we don't have that in our travel demand model yet. And we haven't observed the behavior yet either to put it in the model. But we will have a chapter in the final plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, in the report, and we'll discuss these new technologies. I don't know if I answered your question, or...
I think you validated my perception that we don't know very much about it, and not a whole lot we can do with it right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
until we see it actually, until we see people's behavior
Right.
and how they use it, then we really can't forecast.
Yep.
Renee?
Yeah, I would just add to that, that we had some presentation at the TARPO meeting about electric vehicles and autonomous. And I know I'm going to get my facts a little bit mixed up here, but I know that with the whole Volkswagen debacle, that a lot of money was put into the state coffers to study, new technology with cars. So it's coming. And, even at the state level, they're already putting money into the research. So I can understand why they're saying to be vigilant about this.
I think the Triangle Expressway is a site to do some proving or tests with autonomous vehicles.
I heard they have one, right? They're testing one.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments on the outboard, comments? So do we want to, first of all, endorse those as written, or modify them, or take some other action?
Well, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So if we endorse these, can they be changed? Are they set in stone, as things change? Can we change what we want to be endorsing? Or is this like, we're picking these 6 points and we're sticking with this? And who's going to talk for the outboard?
How about Tom?
Tom's good. We'll take Tom.
Thank you. Tom Altieri, Orange County Comprehensive Planning Supervisor. I think at this stage in the process, it's fine to go ahead and submit the outboard comments as they are and with any additional that you may have. And I think as Andy showed in one of the graphics, we're not quite at the final stage yet. We still have the draft MTP that needs prepared with the preferred alternative in it. So there will be additional opportunity to comment as well as public comment and public hearing to accept additional comments.
Mark?
I just have one question about a specific project where I travel a lot. The Orange Grove, it's under the 4.0 funded projects, very bottom, number 18, operational improvements, Orange Grove Road to Old Fayetteville Road. And I think I saw that was, listed as a 2023 completion. And is that the one that somebody was saying, maybe you were saying that Carborough had a problem with 54, maybe it was you were saying that, down at their end of it?
Yes.
Well, what happened was DOT originally came to us and said they wanted to widen 54 from Carborough all the way to Alamance. Carborough is saying, no, we don't want to encourage more vehicles on the road and would rather do, the new term is modernization. In other words, to look at the possibility of buses, putting a boulevard in there, or putting lights at, somewhere along 54, instead of widening it and turning it into like a major thoroughfare.
So this seems to reflect that, just call it operational improvements, right?
Yeah.
Which would, bicycle lanes, I was surprised that Carborough would have had a problem with bicycle lanes out there, but that sounds good.
Barry?
Well, if we're done with the outboard comments,
Well, why don't we take a vote on the outboard comments and then get on to the next thing, just so we could. So it sounds like, to Penny's question, these comments are just that. They're like general comments to the alternatives analysis, and we could add to them or supplement them or revise them as, until the thing gets finished. Is that accurate, Tom?
It is.
Okay, so let's take a vote on these comments, and then we can get on to our own comments.
Sorry, I jumped ahead there.
No, that's fine.
so I'll move we advance the outboard comments with the rest of our recommendations.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded on the outboard comments. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, so we've endorsed the outboard comments, and now we're on to additional or alternative comments or questions. Barry?
Well, something that came up when we were discussing just transportation issues in general, and came up actually tangentially at the MPO, is having some maps, not just a map of Orange County that has numbers on it, but actually a map of each improvement, so that you can see what's being discussed and how it's being envisioned. And I lost the one I wanted to talk about. It's 86 and 70 intersection north of Hillsborough. Which number is that?
Number 10, maybe?
Yes, number 10. And we had some questions about, did that include the slip lane south of 70 on North Churton Street before it gets to the intersection? And it wasn't clear, it wasn't a problem to add it, but it would be nice to actually have an illustration, at least for us, maybe just our staff can do it, I don't know. I'm not sure it's reasonable to ask the MPO to give us a map of every single intersection.
Okay, so I can make that change and just make sure the description reflects that it would include that.
We talked about that at the meeting after we adjourned. We went, so hopefully it'll be there, but the way to know is to be able to see it illustrated.
Okay. So the other thing is, you can see on your monitor that bit.ly link there. If you go to the MPO's webpage, if you go to the 2045 MTP, there are maps there, and you can click on a little icon of the highway map, and it's just like a Google map. You can go in as close as you want, or you can back up as much as you want, and it has all these projects there.
And does it have them as proposed or as they exist?
It has them as they're proposed in here. Yes. I mean, you have a regular layer of the
Right.
highway, and then you have what's proposed in this plan. You have all the different roadways.
Well, that's great. Well, maybe we just ask our staff to include that in agenda abstracts. Because another one I was wondering about was the Eno Mountain Road, Mayo Street, realign the intersection and make safety improvements doesn't really tell me what's going to change. And if that's already illustrated on the website, the MPO's website, it might be good to just have it here with the ones that have been approved,
Right.
so that if we have any questions, we just go ahead and bring them up at a meeting like this with our own staff. Because Andy, you're serving a larger group than us, but it might make it easier, I think, for our board to understand what's being proposed.
Okay. All right. I'll improve that. I'll change that description. Again, if you looked at it on that map, you would see what it is. It's a realignment. You can see.
But I want to echo Barry's point. I think having those, this list, having those with them, or links in this that we could click on during the meeting and actually see would be useful.
Okay.
Other comments? Did you have your hand up? All right, then. I don't think there's any additional action we need to take at this time. Is there?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, next up, item 6D.
We're getting there.
Proposed projects for Golden Leaf Foundation's community-based grants-making initiative. The board will review and consider selecting up to 3 grant proposals totaling no more than $1.5 million for all 3, and authorize the county managers to submit by October 20th to the Golden Leaf Foundation 2018 Community-Based Grants-Making Initiative. Steve Brantley is here to make a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Steve Brantley, Director of Orange County Economic Development. As Chair Dorson mentioned, item 6D outlines a special grant opportunity now underway through the state's Tobacco Settlement Trust Agency, Golden Leaf Foundation, and the board's consideration of several proposed economic development grant applications submitted on behalf of the county's varied economic development options. In addition, I've distributed to you one new document marked as Addendum Number 1 on blue paper. It's a 12-slide PowerPoint presentation that'll outline Golden Leaf's current grant process and each of the county's 5 proposals submitted for your review. I'll be projecting this PowerPoint at this time and making comments from it. First, a brief introduction of Golden Leaf Foundation, which is the agency that manages half of North Carolina's share of funds from the Master Settlement Agreement between states and participating tobacco companies. Established in 1999 in Rocky Mount, Golden Leaf routinely makes grants to 501c3 nonprofits and to local government entities across the state. Grant awards typically emphasize maximizing 3 core priorities of primary importance to Golden Leaf's mission. That would be economic development, job growth and retention, workforce preparedness, and agriculture. The agency's grants approval guidelines seek opportunities to fund programs which accomplish several goals that they describe as do the most good for the most people, that demonstrate a timeliness of need, where there is a focus on action and not planning, to leverage additional local funds, where there are sustainable outcomes, and have strong local support. Golden Leaf awarded $105 million in total grants in calendar year 2016 and assisted many rural Tier 1 and 2 counties in primarily tobacco-dependent, economically distressed counties, which experience higher unemployment and stagnant growth in per capita income. I'll advance to the next slide. For the current fiscal 2017-2018, Golden Leaf has set aside $11 million to fund a special community-based grants initiative program that is designed to add new financial support throughout much of the 15-county central Piedmont region of North Carolina, a region the state calls the North Central Prosperity Zone. This area includes Orange County. Even though our county ranks among the state's more affluent and developed Tier 3 counties, just like Durham and Raleigh, we have been invited by Golden Leaf to propose grant ideas which best target the agency's core principles. Our economic development activity was specifically mentioned by Golden Leaf President Dan Gerlach as worthy of our effort to pursue this. Other geographic regions of the state are scheduled for future year cycles to pursue their grant ideas, but would have to wait for this cycle for the central part of North Carolina for now. For example, in calendar year 2016, Golden Leaf funded 28 grants totaling $18 million for projects located only in western and southeastern North Carolina. So now it is our opportunity to pursue the grants that we put forth. The next slide shows the timeline of Golden Leaf's process to roll out the program, which I attended, and also my staff, Mike Rotosky, attended, and the town of Carrboro attended. And it shows the scheduling for how they go through the approval process. So the current community-based grants initiative opportunity is a process limited to each county proposing no more than 3 total projects, and where all proposals add up to no more than $1.5 million total for all proposals. Golden Leaf restricts all bids to be made only through the county manager of each county, who must submit a letter of inquiry to Golden Leaf by noon of October 30th of this year with, in our case, the Orange County bid nominations. Orange County currently has 5 proposed applications for the board to review tonight, and a request that the board select up to 3 of those proposals and direct the manager to submit those applications by the October 30th due date. I'll advance to the next slide, which summarizes very briefly all of those, and then I will go through each of them separately. The 5 proposals being presented to the board include an expansion of services at Piedmont Food and Agricultural Processing Center, PFAP, the expansion of utility infrastructure planned by the county's 3 economic development districts, and there are 3 different proposals in that regard, and the town of Carborough's development of a light industrial flex business park along Old NC 86. Attachment 3 to the abstract, which you received previously, is a letter from Carrborough Mayor Lavelle to Board Chair Mark Dorson in this regard for consideration of the Carrborough request. So now I'll very briefly show one slide per each of the 5 proposals. The first option represents a means to support an expansion at the Piedmont Food and Agricultural Processing Facility here in Hillsborough. Eric Hallman, Director of PFAP, is here in the audience and available to comment or answer questions at the end of my presentation, or as you would request. Golden Leaf Management did tell me that they are pleased with their participation with the county in 2010, 11, to be one of the original funders of PFAP in its startup, and that made a good impression to Golden Leaf regarding Orange County's ability to propose and complete projects in that regard. So I'll just go on to the 3 EDD proposals. So this briefly shows the Hillsborough proposal. As you know, other activity going on by the county to extend sewer to this area and to make this available for our prospects looking in Orange County. Then there's the Eno Economic Development District with its total project cost of $1.9 million, a maximum amount requested of $600,000 and a minimum amount requested of $400,000. And Planning Director Craig Benedict can address each of the 3 EDD proposals. And then finally, there's the Buckhorn-Mebane EDD to continue and expand services in that location beyond what the county has already budgeted or envisioned to accomplish. And finally here, the town of Carborough's Old NC 86 Light Industrial Flex Park. Carrborough Town Economic Developer Annette Lafferty is here in the audience and is also available, if desired, to answer questions regarding Carborough's plan for this proposal. And now for the recommendations. All 5 proposals exceed Golden Leaf's grants maximum of 3 total requests per county and the $1.5 million cap for all submissions. Therefore, the manager's office recommends to prioritize the county's top 3 needs as follows. PFAP's application at $280,000, the Hillsborough EDD District infrastructure application at $400,000, and the Carrborough application at $820,000. The application review process will proceed through the winter months and conclude with a final approval by Golden Leaf's board on April 5th of next year. Approved projects will be required to maintain strict compliance regarding any county's reporting of how the grant awards have been utilized. And again, I would editorialize to say that Dan Gerlach, the president of Golden Leaf, has a very strong level of confidence in Orange County's ability to do the management of the reporting process. That's as important in their decision as is the actual proposal for a grant. Successful applicants will also be required to contribute a 20% local cash match for each funded program. For example, Carrborough intends to seek a U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Economic Development Loan and Grant, which is called the USDA Red Leg program, and that is administered by our own local Piedmont Electric Membership Cooperative, and that would be their intended copay. The county would seek Article 46 funding for the required 20% match for any of the EDD infrastructure improvements that would go forward and be approved by Golden Leaf, as well as the PFAP proposal. In conclusion, there may be significant competition for Golden Leaf's $11 million made available in funding for this review cycle. If each of the Central Piedmont region's 15-member counties aggressively pursue this opportunity, and if each county submits the maximum allowable level of grant request, being 3 each at $1.5 million total, then the total request could reach $22.5 million compared to the $11 million that's budgeted. So obviously there's competition, but at the same time, there's no way to determine if every county will actually go through this process or will nominate a proposal that Golden Leaf's board feels is worth pursuing and so forth. So we are trying to take advantage of a unique opportunity that does not roll around often for Orange County in this part of North Carolina to make an effort to put something out there and see if we may be successful by the spring of next year. So that is my initial presentation, and I'm very happy to take questions, and also, as I mentioned, people to represent the current 5 proposals are here in the audience to answer specific questions in that regard.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Steve? We do have one person signed up to speak on this item, but if there are any questions before we go on to that? Mia?
One of the questions I have is specific to the Carborough application. So have they already applied for the USDA money, Red Leg?
Would you care for the town of Carborough to
Sure.
approach the podium and specifically answer their
She's going to be right
Thank
there
you.
with you, momentito.
Rafferty, good evening. No, we have not yet. In terms of timing, the way this is sort of rolling out, if this application goes forward, then it would be the next step for us to make that application to them, and then my understanding is they would make a decision about in December.
The USDA would?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Renee?
And so we have 3 EDDs that we've got proposals. How did you determine the one?
That would be my question. My recommendation is that we chose, of the 3 EDDs, which we already have funds allocated for, but we did choose the one that we would be using the soonest. And so the Hillsborough EDD is ready for design funds, and so that would come as the soonest use of funds at that time.
Other questions? All right, then. We have one person signed up to speak, Judge Jay Bryan, if you want to come up to the podium.
Good evening to you, Mr. Chair, and to
Evening.
the commissioners. My name is Jay Bryan. I'm a member of what's called the Northern Transition Area Advisory Committee that was formed in the late 90s out of response to citizens from the planning jurisdiction in Carborough who were Orange County citizens to be able to represent their interests in front of the Board of Aldermen. And that was a time in which the board was very sensitive to in responding to citizens, Orange County as well as Carborough, in terms of planning in the planning jurisdiction. And that included several charrettes by people coming in to talk to citizens about ways to develop their area. And the hallmark of the board at that time was, in my opinion, to listen to and respond to the concerns and issues of citizens, both Orange and Carborough. It's not been the experience of our committee since a couple of years ago with the current town makeup. In 2011, the town commissioned a charrette on a piece of property on Eubanks and Old 86, 30 acres, 2-day charrette. A number of us, including other residents, appeared, and we contributed to the discussion about what would be an appropriate development there. A report came out, and the idea was that that would be an overlay development in part of the northern transition area to be used for other properties. It turned out that that was not acceptable to the town. In fact, they went the reverse and created a flex zone, which they passed last year, which didn't take into consideration any of the ideas that came out of that two-day charrette by citizens and residents, including Orange County representatives and citizens. So, and they included in that flex zone, well, actually didn't include the CUP, SUP process and protections that help citizens have redress in front of the board for their property rights and harmony and so on. So we had a lot of concern about that process and the town not listening to us. 3 of our representatives are appointed by you, 2 by the town. As far as this matter is concerned, we asked for information in January and didn't get anything, although you had met with them in October. We asked again in February. We got a bit of information, but we haven't had enough information to respond to you about the effects of this locating this light manufacturing across from the great park that the county established in the middle of a rural area at this time. So we ask you to delay your vote on it, ask for more input, allow us to give that to you at the correct time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, that was the only person signed up to speak, so now it's for discussion or additional questions. Penny?
Well,
And then
I have
Earl.
a question about the timing. So what is our timing on this? When do we need to respond with our suggestions? When does everything start rolling?
Well, with respect to submitting bids for the grant, the absolute deadline is noon of October 20th.
Yes.
So there's not a lot of time between tonight and then to mull over which options to pursue. That's really the window, and once you meet noon of October 20th, you can't come back after that. The Golden Leaf website has the word noon in capital bold underline letters. So that's when whatever we would want to pursue has to reach the Golden Leaf office with a county manager's letter and then the very brief pre-application that is currently prepared for each of these.
Yeah, well, Earl was next, and then Mia.
Steve, in the material that we've got, it mentions that Buckhorn is one of the few areas that we've got of economic development designation that has rail. And it's not in the manager's recommendation, but in your opinion, would the further expansion of sewer and water in that area, enhance the ability to develop the area that's accessible by the rail? Rail seems to me to be a missing link in Orange County.
It is the largest of the county's 3 EDDs in terms of acreage, and it's on both sides of the highway, and it's unique to have rail, unlike the other 2 EDDs. At the moment, it's almost impossible for me to market it because there are no utilities in the entire northern part of the Buckhorn EDD where the rail access is, and there's no road access to really show the property other than drive over the railroad track. And so there's a swath that runs almost from Mount Willing Road all the way to Buckhorn Road, a lot of land that at the moment it's not ready to go.
Thank you. I've got comments, but I'll defer to other
Okay.
questions.
Mia?
So you said earlier that this opportunity doesn't roll around very often, so every 3 years, or what's your sense of it?
The state of North Carolina has 7 or 8 prosperity zones, as it's called, and we're in the central Piedmont one of 15 counties, and so Golden Leaf is staging its annual fund giving by each calendar year selecting 1 or 2 of them, and I have not seen this come to Orange County before. So there's a lot of interest, but I have no way of knowing what the competition will be.
Fair enough.
There's also a special grant, or I'm sorry, a regular grant opportunity that can be pursued at any time, but it is meant for small projects of no more than $200,000 or $250,000. This is the only time that there could be, theoretically, one grant of up to 1.5 million for one project or for up to 3 projects, that we could pursue.
Penny?
So my understanding is that we won't have another opportunity to do this between 4 and 5 years. Does that sound correct?
I'm sorry, I don't know the frequency. I could find out for that. Now, Golden Leaf is an option if we had an active industrial project that wanted to take a particular site, and we went to Golden Leaf and they thought that our particular project and the location was something that they could do for a sewer line or an access road or something like that. But that is sort of like when we used the Community Development Block Grant from the state specific to the Morinaga project to get utilities. So there is an opportunity to go, but you've got to have a live project that is going to pick you or another state for Golden Leaf to come in. Golden Leaf would probably not fund a project for us if it was looking at us and Durham. They would have to wait until it got down to Orange County and someplace outside of it. So that, like with Morinaga, but that doesn't happen every day.
Other questions? I mean, the fact is that this Golden Leaf is designed to help the most distressed counties. So we're a Tier 3 county. So
that does influence.
Yeah.
And I asked Dan Gerlach, the president, about that. I said, I'm not sure why I'm here, at your presentation, because we're a Tier 3 county, and they have a mission to try to help the more rural areas. However, they talked about our economic development districts along the interstate, and particularly the ones running from Hillsborough toward Mebane. Alamance County is a Tier 2 county, which means it's technically less affluent than we are. Caswell County, north of Orange, is a Tier 1, which is the poorest of the counties in that regard. So they look at the labor draw from a 1-hour region in our economic development districts as potentially employing people that may not be Orange County residents, but could be coming from more distressed, more rural communities, and they value that. And so I was encouraged to try to pursue this. Again, they think that Orange County would know how to follow the compliance required to show how the money has been spent. And the PFAP example from 2010 and 11 was a favorable impression on that Golden Leaf endeavor with Orange County. So I think it doesn't cost us anything to bid on 1 or up to 3 events, and we may, win at least one of them. So that's, where we are on that.
Okay, comments? Earl?
Yes, in looking over these, I don't question whether all of the projects are something that we need to pursue over time, but as Steve mentions, we're a high-tier county. We're considered a high-wealth county. So for me, we need to pick projects that are not only shovel-ready, but are, pretty much laser-focused of being ready to go. We need to also consider that this is agricultural money. This is tobacco money. And while Orange County is no longer a major player in the agriculture segment of this state, it at one time was a major player in tobacco. Tobacco and dairy was Orange County for very, very, very many years. So therefore, I'm gonna run real quickly through the projects as I see them. PFAF as our first priority, because as I mentioned, this is agriculture money. I think we need to support turning some of it back toward agriculture in Orange County, and this is a perfect way to do it. So I would consider the entire minimum amount for 280 on PFAF. I'm not Hillsborough EDD, we just got through approving an agreement with Hillsborough to move that forward. I think it's critical that we move it forward. So, from my perspective, the minimum amount requested of $400,000 for the Hillsborough EDD. And then, I normally don't disagree with the manager, but I disagree with the manager this time. I think that the Buckhorn EDD is critical that we continue to push that forward as fast as we can, and one way we can do it is to get some infrastructure out there that accesses a possibility of attracting industry that would need and be attracted to some rail. On the Eno EDD, we're not there yet. We need to have more conversations of what we need, what we want down there, what the community wants down there, how that area is going to look over the next, say, 25 to 50 years, and how to develop that area. We're not there. On the Old 86 project with Carborough, we had a presentation in last fall. I've not heard a whole lot more since last fall on that, and I'm not there on that yet. I think that at the very least, we need more of a public conversation on that project as well, just as I mentioned about the Eno project. So for me, it's Buckhorn, Hillsborough, and PFAF.
Other comments? Barry?
I agree with Earl's priorities, and I want to specifically address the Carborough proposal, which I don't think is fully formed, and I think is a very disrespectful proposal. The way it's come forward, Judge Bryan mentions the way in which the lack of public comment. There's never been a public process where the people in the area know what's going to happen. There have been sporadic and informal presentations to the Northern Transition Area Group, but there's never been a public hearing. There's never been a sign-up. If they are, as they said at the meeting in Carborough did in last October, it's a full year that they wanted to rezone it. Well, under the joint planning agreement, they either are going to have a joint public hearing with Orange County, or going to have to at least give us the ability to do courtesy review. And I can't see why we would approve water and sewer to a parcel that's been zoned for rural uses. If you go back to the minutes from a year ago, the reason that it's first of all disrespectful to the public. And I'm really disappointed that our county leadership has allowed this to even be considered as an equal to the other projects that are on this list. Not only is it disrespectful to the public, because they don't even know what's going on in their own neighborhood, but if you go back to the minutes from last year where Carborough assured us that this was going to be a collaborative process, we asked some questions. They have never responded to them. That's been a year. There was certainly plenty of opportunity. Whether it's a good project or it's not a good project, we asked about how the flex space would be made and kept affordable. We were assured we'd get the information. We never got the information. We asked for a map of the zoning in the area. We never got it. We asked for the sections of the plan that speak to this kind of development. Alderman Sales asked staff to provide it to us. We never got it. We asked about Transition Area 1 and Transition Area 2, and at what point Transition Area 1 would have been the qualifications to complete development in Transition Area 1 to 75%, so you could begin to move into Transition Area 2, and the planner for Carborough said it was being worked on, and they get it back to us. We never got that. We asked for a copy of the Northern Transition Area Plan. We never got that. In other words, we were not accorded the respect that you would accord a partner. We were essentially blown off, and the proposal blows off the public, and it blows off Orange County government. And whether it's a good proposal or it's not a good proposal, I think it's really disappointing that another government in this county with which we work and for whom we have admiration and respect would treat us and the public in this manner. So I will never support this project until we get the information that we asked for, and until the public has an opportunity to at least know what's going on where they live. We're the ones who represent the people who live on Old 86. Carrboro does not. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they know what's going on with their property and in their neighborhood. That was the whole point of the joint planning agreement, is to make sure those kinds of things would happen. And going all the way back to the beginning, when Carrboro put the label Carrboro Industrial Zone on Calvander, the county made the commitment to the people who lived out there that we would have these transition areas so they would have an opportunity to weigh in as proposals came up, so they would know what was happening. And this proposal ignores that.
Other comments? Mia?
So I'm quite torn, actually, by this, the Carrboro project in particular. But one of my current concerns comes from a very different direction, which is I'm not entirely sure it's a viable application, because if it specifically says to be competitive, you have to have money pending or in hand for your match. And in this case, if the USDA is going to make a decision, after that application in December, and Golden Leaf's board is making their final decisions about offering opportunities for a full proposal in early December, I just don't think it lines up. And also somewhat to Earl's point about what this money has been meant for. I did an application to Golden Leaf a very long time ago, so I understand that their leadership and their boards can change. But combining that with the fact that the match money isn't going to be in the place it needs to be competitive, I'm very concerned about that particular option. And so I will be willing to listen to other alternatives.
Earl, did you have your hand up again?
I did. I've got a motion when it's appropriate.
All right, any other comments? Just hold that foot, yeah.
One
Mark?
quick question. Is the Golden Leaf Foundation under the auspices of the Department of Commerce, or is it a separate?
Separate.
It's separate, but it is a very frequent participant for incentives that are specific to companies that the state is trying to recruit, just like the community college for training, DOT, and so forth. And so Golden Leaf is very frequently there. They will help put utilities in the ground to attract industry, but they won't invest in shell or spec buildings on the land. So they have their criteria, but they're really primarily a business recruitment, industrial recruiting resource for the state when it's trying to pursue projects to do training and infrastructure. And if it helps a rural community, that's super. But there are many examples where more urban Tier 3 counties receive Golden Leaf assistance as well.
Other questions?
Could I just respond? I'd like to respond to the concern of management bringing this forward. I don't know of a process that we have when a town makes a request, and as a professional courtesy, I brought this forward for the board, knowing that there was some concern about this project. The manager of Carrboro contacted me and indicated that they had an interest in this. They cannot submit this on their own. They must go through the county. So this was brought forward for this board to decide whether they wanted to support that. I don't know whether there's a viable or not a viable option any other way than to bring this forward to the board for you all to make that decision. For me to stop it at my desk didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. And so that is why this was brought forward. And we did send the minutes of the last meeting I sent the minutes of the meeting to the town manager and indicated that there was some concerns that there wasn't answers from the last meeting. So I just wanted to make that clear that that is why this is before you this evening.
And did you want to comment?
Go ahead, I can comment in a minute if you
Well,
want.
no, you can go ahead. I'll wait till you.
Just to share my thought process, I agree with Commissioner McKee's assessment, and I think that the Buckhorn EDD is a promising place to provide jobs and tax money for the county, and we should be looking at that, as often as we can, and this is an opportunity. And on the other hand, this is the first time as an official commissioner that I've been involved in this, but I was at the meeting last fall and heard the story and the proposal, and there's a lot to like about it. I felt like it could really be a good project. It is a little disappointing that, as we heard from Judge Bryan, that the community has not been approached in the way that they should have, and I feel like we do have a responsibility to the people in that area because they are still, we're still answerable to them. So I hope that the Carrboro project can move forward and be fleshed out and all the proper things done to move it forward, but it doesn't seem quite ready yet. And I appreciate Commissioner McKee bringing an alternative proposal.
Renee?
I have a question. If when we decide to, as was proposed or is about to be proposed, to swap out the Carrboro for Buckhorn, there's a difference in the minimum. Can we still submit, the minimum for Buckhorn-Mebane is $950, whereas the Carrboro is $820. How?
I would, what Commissioner McKee said was he said the two minimums for the two previous, there's only 1.5 million. So you would have to back in, and that would be what the Carrboro is currently at, is 820, is what is the amount left within the grant.
I just did mention the 820, but that's where I was at for Buckhorn.
So we'd submit less than the minimum that's listed.
Yeah, but does that work? I mean, I guess, Steve, you suggested the 950. Will it still work with 820? I mean, I think it would. I just want to make sure that it doesn't.
I believe Carrboro's estimate for the total cost is about
960.
960.
Well, for the total cost, about 1.5 million. And the original request by the town was 1.25 million. And in the review by the manager's office and economic development of the total 5 projects, the final recommendation was to include the Carrboro proposal, but not at 1.25 million, but instead at 800.
Right.
Right, but the
what I'm
question is, if we put the Buckhorn in, and there's only 820 left, does that affect that as a proposal, or can we not put Buckhorn in
I
without
would
putting
say
in
it
950?
would not. We have Article 46 money that has been allocated for that EDD.
Right. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to
Right.
get at 1.5 million if we switch
Right,
out in their
right.
different amounts, but thank you, okay.
Penny?
So if it does get switched out, is there at some point when we get responses from Carrboro and neighbors feel like they've got some answers, could they apply to us for some Article 46 money for their project?
All towns have that option to request Article 46 money from the county and to look at that going forward. The challenge that we have with that, of course, is that we have the amounts that we have coming in and the amounts we're spending, and the debt service is being used with most of the Article 46. But we would look at that and we would determine the priorities at that time of this board.
And what's the percentage of Article 46 money that we've spent in the towns? Do we have any idea, as opposed to the out in the county?
The Economic Development District's infrastructure takes 60% of each year's annual amount of money. the loan and grant programs are almost exclusively in the towns, because we're not making loans and grants to businesses per se in Cedar Grove. And so we do have our statistics that show whatever is available in our loan and grant program, all the recipients, almost all of them, are in either Hillsborough, Chapel Hill, or Carrboro. We have statistics that show what percent of loan and grant recipients are in each of the towns. If you remember the little booklet we gave out last year that showed the first year's results. So that is...
More concerned about, I'm more interested in infrastructure.
That's predominantly how Article 46 money has been flowing into the towns, and also the launch incubator, which flows into Chapel Hill because of the agreement between the county and Chapel Hill. In that regard, there was a sewer line repair in Carrboro some years ago where Article 46 was the county's participation with the CDBG grant that was used to fix that sewer line there.
So that would be the infrastructure that's been allocated towards towns.
Project.
We have not had any other infrastructure projects in the urban areas.
I mean, I would point out that when Article 46 was proposed, when the county did its information campaign prior to the referendum, the core uses were stated at that time, and the overwhelming use was debt service for utilities in the economic development districts. And the use of that money since then, since the referendum was passed in November 2011, has essentially followed that. So, of course, the board can make any decision that it wishes as to how that money is spent, but we're essentially following the proposals that people voted on back in 2011.
Okay, so Earl's ready to make a motion. I just want to make a few comments before he does. I want to just follow up on Barry's comments, which I think were actually a little unfair to Carrboro. This golden leaf thing has just come up in the last 5 minutes. So we are scheduled to have a meeting with Carrboro. All of those, that's on the agenda, this project. And so I don't think the fact that I don't think it's fair to penalize them because we don't have it ahead of this. We didn't know this was coming. It wasn't at agenda review. So, I don't think that's being really fair to them that we didn't get all this information. The stuff we asked for a year ago, I mean, there's a little bit of responsibility on us. If we want information and we don't get it, we should be following up and saying, where is it? And so I support this. I think it's important that we have, these three represent a diversity of projects that I think is important. The fact is, I don't think there's any way they're going to fund two EDD projects. It's the same project in two places. I think it's important for our relationships with our colleagues, and I think the timetable should not color how we want to pursue this. I think it's an important project. I think it's worth continuing to explore. And, I think the concerns that we've heard from residents, we can continue to explore those. I mean, we're under this super tight timeline to make this approval, but it's not going to happen till April. They're not going to award the things. And so, I think I think it's reasonable for Carrboro to have brought this forward because they had this opportunity under a short timeline. And so I'm going to support it, and I'm not going to support a motion that doesn't include it. So,
May I respond?
yeah, of course.
Okay. I don't think I'm being unfair to Carrboro. I think Carrboro is being unfair to the people who live out there that we represent. They had plenty of time to get us this information, regardless of whether there was a golden leaf application. It's almost 12 months. If it was really that important for them to get the information to us and to the public, they could have asked the manager to say, could you put this on your agenda for discussion and have it for decision on the 17th, because the deadline's the 20th. But they didn't ask for that because they're not paying that close attention to how we might do this if we wanted to give people a full opportunity to understand what's going on. If you agree to put water and sewer into a rural area without knowing the consequences, it's not responsible. It may not, the best way to limit its applicability to other parcels is to size it so small that it won't really be that effective to spend the money on it. So if you're going to make it big enough for other development, then we should see what the consequences are going to be before we sign off on it. And this is our chance to sign off on it. So that's why it's not, in my mind, not unfair. And had Carrboro really wanted to do it in a way that was more inclusive, as they said at our meeting last year, they would have asked for us to bring us the information before we had to make a decision.
All right.
Okay, to preface my motion, I just want to make sure that it's clear. My intent is not to penalize any of these projects because I think all of these projects have potential. I just think 2 of them are not fully cooked. And I think there's not a one of us that don't understand that Orange County in this type of situation is a disadvantage because of the perception that we are a wealthy county. So therefore, my motion is going to be that we request funding for the PFAF at $280,000, Hillsborough EDD $400,000, and Buckhorn Mebane EDD at $820,000. Can we move forward?
You mean Piedmont? Piedmont?
PFAF?
Oh.
He did it first.
Oh, okay.
PFAF.
His motion is PFAP at 280, Hillsborough at 400, and Buckhorn at 820.
Yes.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? I'll just say again, I think that, I don't think it's fair to penalize Carrboro because of the way the timing of this thing came up. And I think that, I think there's a broader disagreement among this board about extending water and sewer generally that this is caught up in. So, and we do need to have those discussions, I agree. But I think this is more a question of timing than disrespect. I'll just say that. Mia?
So again, I don't, like Earl, I think that these are all projects that really have potential. It's, for me, it's not so much about the extending the water and sewer. It's, I've spent 30 years looking at RFPs, and you have to do what they say. It's extremely rare to have them not give you the money. I mean, for them to give you the money when you have, it doesn't match. And Renee is also nodding, having done the same thing. So I feel like because of that, I don't want us to throw away an opportunity for money for this county. And so therefore, for me, it doesn't have to do with the politics of who did what when. It's about, I think, the most viable projects need to go forward.
Renee?
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I missed a meeting last year. I was out of town. So I couldn't make any requests. And I don't know what has been going on, but I do think it's a good project. I mean, I don't know all the minutiae. I do think it's a good project, but like Mia, I'm concerned that we would put forth a proposal that still has controversy, and we might be throwing away money because we don't have, it doesn't have support. And that's what, the foundations are looking for, that you've got partnerships and people are, a good percentage of people are on board.
Well, and
That'd
just to
my
be clear,
concern,
these projects will be considered independently.
Right,
So they could
yeah.
fund 1 or 2 or 3 or none.
Right.
So I just want to
Yeah,
make sure that's
but
right.
I mean, and I think that we have some other possibilities for Carrboro. This is not, the be-all, end-all.
Can I ask you a question
Yes.
to the motion maker, and maybe this is to the manager? If given what you said about the Hillsborough EDD being the first priority, would it make sense to change the amounts we sort of backed into the 820 for Buckhorn and 400 for Hillsborough? I'm just wondering if
I don't
make
think,
sense for those monies to be moved
I don't
around?
think it makes a difference. We've
Okay.
got funds budgeted already
I just wanted
for
to check.
both of them.
Yeah, and my thinking is that the Buckhorn project is a larger acreage project, it's a larger project, it's already moving along. It also gives access to what Mr. Brantley mentioned about the access to rail, and that's why I was thinking of that setup. And if I might respond, I understand the chair's concern over partnership with Carrboro, and I also share that concern. But just as I think that the Eno Economic Development District is going to require us to have a larger discussion. That's why I didn't include that, so that's why I wouldn't include that. I think that our discussion with Carrboro on this future project, it needs to be fleshed out. We need to have that discussion. We need to bring the community into it. And there's no reason that we can't have that. There's no reason I can see that we can't find a way to work with Carrboro as a partner in the future. And that project, for me, is further out than the three that I put in my motion.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No. The motion passes 5-2. Dorson, Rich, dissenting.
Question?
Yes.
I'd like to, Ms. Manager, I'd like to bring back, I think I asked this when I first came on the board, you weren't here at that point. I'd like to bring back a discussion on how we spend the Article 46 dollars. I'd like to review what the previous board did. I was not on the board when that discussion happened and how we spend it. And I'd like to know the percentages of what we spend on infrastructure out in the county versus the towns, and what Mr. Brantley said about how much we're spending with the revolving loans for towns versus county.
We'll treat that as a petition and
Thank you.
bring
We'll
it
take care
to agenda review.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
I realize I was not being politic or diplomatic, but I feel that strongly about the way that this was done, that I felt it incumbent upon me to say it, but it has no bearing on whether I think it's a meritorious project. I just think that we're not, as others have said, we're not at the point where it has justified its merit to invest in it. And if we get to that point and we get our questions answered, even if they're not answers that we want to hear, at least we got answers, and the public has a chance to know what's going on, then I would feel comfortable proceeding. But we're not there for me, which is why I felt so strongly.
All right, moving on to item 6E, which is the Board of Commissioners calendar, 2018 meeting calendar. And we're going to discuss and consider approving a proposed meeting schedule for the board. So we had a discussion, and Donna, do you want to lead this, or would you like me to? Okay, well, you're listed as the information person. No, that's fine, thank you. I'll be happy to do that. So we had a good discussion of this at a work session? Great. So we had a good discussion at a work session, which you recall, and then there are 2 draft calendars at your places. So the one thing we agreed on in the work session was to remove the quarterly public hearings, the 4 quarterly public hearings, and have those as public. We've agreed on that, and that is working its way through the process. Is that right, John?
Yes, it is.
So that's happening, and that's going to come before us. We'll have to vote on that to amend the UDO to do that, but both of these calendars have already incorporated that change, even though we haven't yet done the final vote on it. But both of them incorporate that change. So there are some, there's some decision items that we did not resolve at the work session that are before us. And so, and those decision items, just to summarize, which is listed in the agenda, one decision item is, do we want to keep meetings with the towns on separate days, or do we want to have them as the first portion of a work session? That's decision item 1. 1B is, if we do have them on the work sessions, do we want to start the work sessions earlier? That's decision item 1. Decision item 2 Yes. Yes, I'm looking at those, but those are complicated the way they're written, so I'm trying to Yeah, they're a little complicated. I'm going to try to streamline them if I can, but I'm going to get all of them in there. So decision 1 and 1B. Then there's some follow-up depending on what we do. Then the second decision item is about the legislative breakfast, and I can report on that. We can take that one up first, because I was tasked with contacting the legislators and asked them what they preferred. I told them, keep it the way it is, a separate breakfast, or have it as part of a regular meeting. They all agreed having it as part of a regular meeting would be fine, and having it with where there's people. And so all three of them contacted me. It was all via email. So we could still vote to do what we want, but that task was completed, and they said that was fine. So the idea, if we want to, would be this is decision point 2, not as a separate meeting, standalone meeting, but become part of a regular meeting. And then that's decision item 2. The third, which I think we made the decision already, although we may have to ratify it here, is on the evaluations of the manager and the attorney and the clerk. What had been suggested at the meeting was having those before a regular meeting, so not a separate day. The manager on one day first, and then the clerk and attorney on a second, together like they have been, same day, but second in the queue behind after we do the manager, and doing those starting at 5:30 or 6, and then having a regular meeting, rather than having it at the end of the meeting. So that's the summary of the decision points, and so now we just need to discuss those. So we can start, why don't we start with the legislative breakfast, because I feel like we now have consensus from our legislators. So I would entertain a motion or a discussion of that, so.
Well, I'll make a motion, but first I want to just suggest that if we do that, we make sure that we have our public hearing about our legislative agenda prior to that meeting, so that the public has already commented before we meet with them. And then I'll move that we move the meeting with the legislators to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of County Commissioners.
Second.
Okay, so that's been made and seconded, and I think the point about the timing of it is exactly right. Any discussion on that decision point? Penny?
And does that meeting just start at 7 and then we continue on with a regular meeting when we're done?
Yeah, I think it would be an item on the regular agenda.
We're envisioning just an item, not a separate meeting.
Right. Yeah, it would be a regular, what's the heading? It would be just a regular agenda, yeah.
And is that what they're expecting?
Yes, I mean, that's what I suggest. That's what I said was the alternative.
Would they like to be just part of a regular meeting?
Yeah, they said, specifically, being part of a regular meeting would be fine.
Okay.
And if you cut out the grumbling about the rest of the General Assembly at our breakfasts, they're not really that long anyway.
Right.
And the breakfast.
But there's no breakfast.
We have lots of nuts back
Right.
there.
We can give them biscuits.
We got nuts everywhere.
Mark will go to Biscuitville.
Yes.
All right, I'll do it.
All right, so there's a motion and a second to move the legislative breakfast into a regular
Commissioner
meeting.
Dorison, excuse me.
Okay.
You got a second?
Yes, and Mia seconded it. So is there any other discussion about that? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so that's one decision item resolved. So now the second is the question of the meetings with the towns. And so we started a discussion on that, now I don't know if there's more people want to say or we just want to vote on it, but I defer to you all. Earl?
Sometimes the meetings with the towns go short, sometimes they go to 9 or 9:30. Personally, I enjoy some short meetings every once in a while, even though it means another meeting to have. But I don't object to having something after, very much like I think we did last year with the fire department, but we don't need to schedule much after, because I think that the later it gets, the less efficient we get.
Barry?
Well, I agree with Earl. I think, although I may want to be excused from the next meeting with Carborough, I think it would be good to continue the meetings because it's useful to have relationships. And it's also humanly satisfying. And one of the best ways to do that is to actually sit around a table and talk about issues of common concern. And then if we do schedule a topic after, we should just try and urge the chair and vice chair and manager to pick topics that require either no or just one additional staff person to stay, so that we're not inconveniencing too many other people if we don't get to it, because it was such an engaging conversation that we went till 9:30 or 10, and we really don't want to start on something new.
So can I just ask, if this is a follow-up question to both of you. So I just want to be clear, are you suggesting keeping the meetings as separate days and still having the work sessions as separate days? You're not talking about scheduling, you're both talking about having, let's say, the meeting with Carborough on Tuesday, and then there would not as part of a work session, just as a separate meeting.
I am.
Yes, but I mean, if we add an agenda item to consider after the meeting is over, if time allows, I'm okay with that. But yes, I'm suggesting we leave the meetings with the town as they exist now.
Okay.
Just as a respect factor, if nothing else, because we need that face time with the towns.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the option of having them on the same day as a work session, there's no option on the table of not having the meetings with the towns. The option is we have it on a separate day, and then on another day we have a work session. That's option A. Option B is we have a meeting scheduled from 7 to 8:30 is with the town. Then the town leaves, and then we have from 8:30 to 10 a work session. Those are the two options. There's not any proposal to eliminate the meeting, so I just want to make sure everyone is clear on that. So, but both of you are saying keep it on a separate day. Mark?
I'm uncomfortable not having it on a separate day and as a standalone meeting, because I think since it only happens once a year, we invite them to meet with us, and I don't think there should be any pressure to move on to something else. I think if discussions ensue that take longer, we should comfortably allow those discussions to happen. And like Earl mentioned, it's a question of respect. I think it is that we want to let them know that they're welcome to work it out with us on whatever issues might be on the table that night. So I just don't want that pressure of them, we're all looking around like, okay, we got to run them out of here because we got 2 hours of work session or whatever.
Other comments? Renee?
Yeah, I would agree, and what I think we should do is, in a sense, going along with what Earl had said, and having topics to talk. Well, maybe it's not exactly what you're talking about, but I think that, for example, we had an item tonight that we could discuss with Carborough, and that perhaps if we gave more substance to the meetings, that we would take up maybe 2 hours, but make them more substantive, rather than just meet and go over a few items and then, oh, well, we don't have anything else to talk about. The next, we're done in an hour. But I think if we have more topics that need to be discussed and we can flesh it out, that would be the time to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, if it wasn't clear, I see them as separate, but also because of something that you have said previously, is that we need more opportunities to talk among ourselves, and that the work sessions afford us those opportunities. And they afford us opportunity to go into more depth about some items. And I think it's important, there's always this ebb and flow of what's micromanaging versus what you should leave to the staff. And I think that at work sessions, we have the opportunity to go into more depth about a few topics and to speak more informally and to maybe be a little more relaxed. And I think it would be hard to do that if we first had taken up half of the time with a meeting with somebody else. And then it sounds good to say 7 to 8:30 and then 8:30 to 10, but there's a lot of schmoozing that goes on at that 8:30 interface. So it really is only an hour and 15 minutes. And I just don't think that serves this board well enough to do the kinds of informal and in-depth conversations that I think we need and enjoy.
Other comments? Well, I'll just make one last pitch, but it seems like it's clear which way this is going. I think that, the 7 to 8:30 is not, obviously, nothing we set on an agenda is a hard deadline. If we were having a conversation and it was going well, I wouldn't say, or whoever is chair wouldn't say, nope, that's it, it's 8:30, get out. I mean, what we would do is say, okay, we'll have to bump something on the work session to the next work session or something else, just like we do all the time. So, and, the other thing is, there's always the opportunity to add. If we determine, what, we really need a longer work session on item X or item Y. Just to Renee's point, I think it's a good one. I mean, I've been trying to make those meetings with the towns more like a work session with the towns, rather than just having, their planning director do a presentation, our planning director do, I mean, so I'm conscious of that. And it goes to what you said, Barry, about having that same kind of interaction. So I feel confident that we could do it, and, I'm going to support the one day, but it seems clear that that is not going to carry the day. So if someone, unless there's any other discussion on this, Mia?
I'll just say that I will join with you, but I also recognize that that may be, this board doesn't want to do that. But I do believe that we could do it if we wanted to, but this board wants to operate in a way that probably wouldn't suit it. So, but I will give you solidarity, my friend.
Well, I feel the solidarity from everybody, no matter how they vote, because, I feel the love tonight. I'm like the Lion King. Yes.
And I think that even with the work sessions, if we find there's nothing to put on an agenda, we just cancel it, but at least we know that it's there. But if we can, put everything in the day that we meet with Carrboro or Chapel Hill or whatever, that's fine. Just cancel the next one.
All right, any other discussion?
Do you need a motion?
Yeah, let's just do it as a motion to resolve, so.
Just a motion to leave the meetings with the towns as standalone days. Standalone meetings.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Dorson and Burrows dissenting. That motion passes 5-2. So I think that covers all the decision points, because now we're not having half work sessions on.
This one?
The evaluation.
The staff evaluations, we didn't vote on.
Oh, that's right, we didn't vote on that. So yes, so the idea of having the staff evaluations before a regular meeting and what time you want to start those. That sounds good to me. Yeah, that's great. I'm sorry. So that and the idea is, again, the manager will schedule the managers first and on one day, and then the clerk and attorney on the two of them on the same day, but after the manager's evaluation.
And then go into the budget work session.
And then we would start a work session, yeah. Mia, and then Earl, I'm sorry.
It may say this somewhere, and I'm just not finding it. So those would start at 6 like they normally do?
5:30.
And then, or what?
It was originally suggested at 5:30.
Okay.
And dinner would be provided, but 6 o'clock we could do with either time.
Okay, that's fine. 5:30, actually, particularly for the joint one with the clerk and the attorney, makes sense to me.
Earl?
I'm not going to quibble over the time we start, but I'm a little concerned over doing the clerk and the attorney on the same night and expecting to get anything done after that. I think for the last couple of years, by the time we got the managers and clerks finished, we were after 10 o'clock, so.
Attorney and the clerk, you mean?
Other comments? Renee, then Barry?
I'll probably be the only one voting this way, but that's okay. I'm going to be like you. I would rather do evaluations on one day separate from other business that we have to take care of. And I would agree with what was just said, that, doing two on one day is enough. And, to go into talking about the budget afterwards, I think that's really overloading that day. I would prefer just to go in with a clear mind that I'm just doing evaluations for the day, even if we had to do all three, at one day. But that's how I feel.
I'd just like to know honestly from the attorney, the manager, and the clerk, if it's okay to watch us chew our food and eat while they're being evaluated. Is that an uncomfortable situation, or is that okay?
Doesn't matter to me.
Be honest.
I'm not bothered by it, so.
No, I'm not bothered by it.
They'll be eating also.
What if we schedule them on the day of a budget public hearing? Then we don't have to do anything. We just listen and receive information. Could we work that out?
Let me see the.
And those meetings are usually short, those budget public hearings.
As of now,
Not now.
we proposed to be on May 10th and May 17th. Again, we could put the managers first, if that's the board's pleasure, on the 10th. I'm not sure if I am getting clarity on having the attorney and clerks on the same night on the 17th, prior to a budget public hearing. I just need some clarity,
I don't think we have developed any clarity here
Make sure we
on
didn't
this
miss
side of the
anything.
jump, so we're working on that right now. Earl?
When we talk about putting them in front of a budget public hearing, doesn't the budget public hearing start at 7, and isn't the public going to expect it to start at 7? And if we start at 5:30, there's no way we're going to get there, even if we only do one at a time.
Well, I don't agree with that, but that's a concern. Yeah, I mean, we'll have a hard stop.
Yeah.
Okay, other
Do I-
comments?
I think that was a good idea, because I don't really have to think, just have to listen.
Right. I'm looking out.
To think.
All right, so let's make a decision. Mia?
So I am sort of intrigued by the thought of doing each one, so doing this in front of 3 meetings, just doing one at a time. So an hour and a half for the attorney and the clerk does seem a little bit tight. So just a thought to put out into the ether.
Mark?
I'm with Mia on that.
All right, so somebody make a motion.
And
Let's move forward.
if we do them separately, I'm okay with that. I'm
Oh
just
my
not
God.
good with 2 and then trying to do something else.
I'm going to make a motion.
All right, go ahead.
I'm going to make a motion that we do them before the 2 public hearing sessions on the 10th and the 17th, and do the manager first on the 10th, and then the attorney and clerk on the 17th.
Do you have a start time? Do you like to place? them?
5:30.
I'll second that motion. It's not going to go anywhere, but I'll second it.
Right.
So go ahead, Barry.
I'd consider it if it was 5 o'clock, but not, certainly not to do
Is that a
2 in
friendly
an hour.
amendment?
Sure. Yeah, sure, we'll try that.
You're the motion maker.
So I wasn't thinking too straight there. So you're saying 2 on one night?
On the 10th, we would do the manager, starting at 5:30, and or 5,
Okay.
rather, because we have a friendly amendment. On the 17th, we would do the attorney and clerk, starting at 5, and start our meetings at our public hearings at 7. I accepted it. He has to accept it, though, too.
5 o'clock?
5 o'clock, Mark has to accept it.
Yeah, I'll accept that. I'll get there at 5:30.
I'll lead the discussion.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. Earl?
I've got a question. Is the motion that we do the manager on the 10th?
Yes, sir.
And the attorney and the clerk on the 17th?
Yes. Starting
Would the
both at 5.
motion maker accept an amendment that we do the clerk and the attorney on 2 separate nights, that we do one evaluation before each work session? I'm concerned that if we try to cram 2 evaluations in front of a work session, whether it's a budget public hearing, a regular work session, or whatever, that it's going to cram it too tight.
I agree. I think we could do it.
All right, so let's vote on the motion, and then we'll vote on the next motion. Okay, so the motion is the manager on the 10th, and the clerk and the attorney on the 17th, starting at 5 o'clock. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Yeah, it was Darson and Rich. Okay, so all those opposed? Say no, just so we never get to hear it. Yeah, okay, that motion fails 2 to 5. Now, someone make another motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
So I am squinting, but I believe what I'm going to suggest is that we do the managers on May 3rd, and then one of the other, either the attorney or the clerk, that can be sorted out later on the 10th and the 17th, so that there'll be one evaluation in front of one of those 3 meetings.
And what time
Managers
you
come
want
up
to start
first.
those?
5:30.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion is for having the 3 separate evaluations starting at 5:30 on the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th of May. Any discussion about that? Yes.
We're working off of the baseline calendar then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. 3 days of 3 evaluations on 3 days prior to meetings, starting at 5:30. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, did you have your hand up?
No, no,
Okay.
no.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, that motion passes 5 to 2. And look, we got rid of the legislative breakfast. And actually, they're on the same days, the evaluation, so we cut it down.
And the public hearings.
Yeah, well, I wasn't counting that tonight. I celebrated that last time.
All right.
Yes.
Please.
Really good idea.
Yeah, consent agenda, I think.
Yeah,
would be
consent,
fine.
consent,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good.
All right, well, I appreciate everyone's efforts. I mean, we should be proud, right? We went from having 49 meetings, and now we're going to have 49 meeting days, and now we're going to have, we knocked off 3, we're going to have less than 40. So that's
And
good.
maybe less than that,
So
because work
we
sessions.
took down, almost, how much, 20%? 10%? Yeah, almost 20%. So well done. All right, very good. So, moving right along, item 7, we have a report on the Passmore Center expansion update. We're going to get a report outlining the design and project schedule for the Passmore Center expansion capital project. And Angel Barnes and Ken Redfoot are going to make a presentation.
Good evening. I'm Angel Barnes with Asset Management Services. Thank you for your time tonight. Here we also have Jeff Thompson, Asset Management Services Director, Janice Tyler, Department of Aging Director, and Ken Redfoot with CRA Associates. The purpose of this item is to present the proposed design for the Passmore Center expansion. In 2016 and 17, you appropriated $550,000 towards this expansion in the capital investment plan. The original intent was to expand the back patio portion of the Passmore Center near the adult day. However, during the initial design reviews and meetings with staff and the CRA consultants, we agreed that a more useful programming space is at the entry of the facility. So the documents that we have are ready for bid after the presentation tonight, and you can refer to your abstract for the construction schedule. So also, we are available for questions as they arise, but at this time, I will turn over to Mr. Redfoot with CRA Associates for the presentation.
Thank you, Angel, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to do a brief architectural presentation and answer any questions that you would have for me this evening. Not working. Okay, so this first drawing basically I'm going to set the stage for where the actual addition is located. This is the existing Sportsplex entrance right here, and I know this is a partial plan. It doesn't show the whole site, but we thought we'd zero in on just this area that is of concern for us. The existing line here represents the existing drive loop, and this would be the main drop-off area right here. And so we kept that line, that curb line intact, kept all the parking intact, and what we're doing is we're working in this zone, which basically is, the perimeter of that zone is the existing wall of the senior center, of Passmore Center, and this is where the existing vestibule is located here. So you can see in the blue object that we are creating basically a new vestibule. We are creating about approximately 1,200 square foot flexible area that will become a nice addition to the front of the building. And then also we're reworking the information desk so it's much more easy to work in relationship to the overall vestibule and the proposed addition. So the way that you would get into the facility is basically there's a handicapped access ramp that goes up here. It's a 1 in 20 slope, which is a very gradual slope, so there's no handrails required. You go all the way up and into automatic sliding doors that are here in the vestibule, and you turn, and this is an automatic sliding door too, which is actually more convenient than the present location. There's a waiting area here.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? It's hard to see where the pointer is on there, so I don't know if you can wiggle it or you just want to walk over and
Yeah, I'll do it.
and point. It's just hard to see where you're talking about.
Okay. I'm talking about the handicapped access is along this walkway here, and the slope is 1 in 20, so no handrails are required. It's very nicely accessible through that whole line. When you get to this point, there's an automatic sliding door here and here. This is a much greater sized vestibule than is presently there, so you'll actually have some seating in that area. Also, these are automatic doors, as I just said, which is an improvement over the doors that are there presently. So you come here, and then immediately to your left is an information desk, a new desk. It will actually serve, it's a little bit larger in size, and so you have access for 2 or 3 people if necessary.
But now they're telling me you have to go back to the mic so they can hear you at the
Record.
recording.
You can switch.
It's fine.
You want to do the...
You can do the pointing.
Oh,
Yeah, he moved,
Yeah.
he changed the color of the pointer.
So Angel is going to serve as Vanna White. So what we're creating is around a 1,400 square foot addition. About 200 square foot of that is this new vestibule that I just described to you, and the remaining area is an open, flexible space. Some of our discussions, we talked about it being a living room, but it also can be broken down and used for other activities. But the place is so intensely used that this will become quite a benefit for folks in having a good, relaxing place right at the front door before they go into the higher use activity centers that are beyond this area. So next. This is a larger rendition. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this other than to say that in the area called living room, this is just a projected idea. This is an artist's idea of how you could set up the space. The furniture is going to be worked out with the owner, with Janice and other folks. Also, I want to make sure that you see in this one that we have an outdoor patio that's also being planned, and that becomes a real positive outdoor space. The green area that is beyond the outdoor patio and the proposed landscape area is going to become the new garden that as you know, they have a pretty elaborate garden area there that is well maintained, and it's my understanding that everybody's on board with this plan, and so the idea of rekindling or making that garden area as good as it is now is something that can't happen. This is a rendering of the appearance of the outside of the building. We worked with staff to try to sort of reclaim or change the character of the entrance to the senior center, change the scale a little bit to make it distinct from the larger entrance of the Sportsplex. And you can see as you walk along the entrance, basically it's a lot of windows. We wanted this space to be full of light, similar to what you have there now, but I think it's going to be a very nice living room space for the folks to use. And you can see right at the entrance door, as you go up, there is a covered canopy at that point. Under the base bid, we will have a covered canopy at that front door. We'll have an alternate bid to actually bring the canopy cover all the way down the facade and turn and go into the existing brick wall. The material that we're using is a cementitious board, so you actually have a kind of a slatted effect to it, and it gives it, I think, a nicer, more residential feel, and it sort of contrasts with a larger brick wall behind.
I have a question before you move on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in comparing the two slides before, at the patio, outdoor patio, is that a wall? If you go back, yeah, near with the...
That's a low wall that will have a railing on it, because when folks come out of that exit door where it says living room, there's an exit door that's required by fire code. You'd have to actually go and turn and step down 2 steps. And so we built a low wall to accommodate the steps and the rail.
Could that be a ramp?
Well, the thing with the ramp that...
Too steep?
It's, whenever we're having to deal with a ramp, for example, this is actually 3 risers. So 3 risers is 18 inches, which is 18 feet. So when we're trying to negotiate the changes in these small spaces, it becomes a little bit of a difficulty. So we tried many, many different ways of doing this and felt that the strongest access was on that 1 in 20 walkway going up, where you had no ramps and no rails, and it was just a very straightforward approach to the project. I've already talked about that. These are some renderings. This is in that waiting vestibule. This is just a show that on the left-hand side we have large windows, be a nice inviting space for people to just wait for their ride, you know, another alternative kind of space other than in the main living room. This is a view in the living room. Again, colors and furniture are just basically artistic renderings, but it shows you how you can actually populate the space with bookshelves and nice furniture and really have an inviting space for the folks that use Passmore Center. This is a view from the other corner of the room looking back at the new reception desk, and again, the huge windows that are along that face that offer really nice views and sunlight out onto that existing drop area. So that's the presentation that I have for you this evening, so I'm here to answer any questions. Angel's here, and Jeff and Janice as well.
Questions? Earl?
Yes, you've already cut me off to pass on one of my questions, which is...
I didn't intend to do that.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I've had several calls over the past week or so about the fact that the rendering, the proposal did not include a covered portico or a covered approach, very much similar to the way the Sportsplex has a covered approach to the door, fairly close to the curb. So I appreciate you mentioning that as a possibility, and I think that would garner a lot of support from the users, because all of these calls have been from folks that use the senior center. The second thing that I've been asked about, and I've promised to go look, because I really don't understand what they're talking about, Seemingly, there is some difficulty negotiating from the Sportsplex facility to the senior center facility without going outside for handicapped. I'm going to go and find out what the exact routing is. It's not shown here, I'm sure, but
Can you point out there? Okay. Actually, there's always been an easy access door from the Sportsplex that can get you into the senior center, and then basically you can walk right into the senior center
okay,
without
I'm
going
going to go
outside
and
at
see
all.
what they're talking about. But I did want to bring that up. There's been 2 calls specific on the lack of available entry from the Sportsplex to the senior center, and I couldn't imagine, because I don't think it would be ADA compliant if there was not.
They said it's locked. I got the same thing. They were saying it's locked or something.
Oh, the door is locked?
Oh, Jeff Thompson wants to talk about
Oh,
the
okay.
operational aspects of that.
Andrew, you need to point that door out again. In the original design in 2007, that door was actually designed for a under-roof pass-through between the Sportsplex and the future Passport Center at that time. The Sportsplex existed and the Passport Center was built between 2007 and 2009. Staff at the time felt like that would be, we had ramping and entry without that door, so that door was essentially not blocked, but it's not been utilized as a pass-through. And what staff has agreed to do now is to revisit that question, to have that door as a pass-through, so someone could actually request to go on grade from the Sportsplex to the Passport Center and vice versa, if necessary.
Go ahead.
Might follow up.
Yeah, you have
But
the
why would they need to request? Why would that not be open and accessible at the same hours and availability as any other part of either one of those facilities?
Great question. Right now, that space that it goes into is not public space, it's office space, but we're working on reconfiguring that to have public access through that space.
I
On the
would
Passport
appreciate
side,
that.
not the, on the Sportsplex side, it's lobby space. On the Passmore side, it's not public space.
I think
currently
it would make
configured.
it more amenable for the folks that's using it, because I have had several people mention that.
Yes, sir.
Barry, Renee, then Penny.
I just had a question. What happens to the patio area in the back? Is that going to stay the same?
It stays the same.
Are you still thinking?
No.
Oh.
If that's what's being proposed, I could see, are we doing that based on a limited budget or on no more need for space?
Well, we designed that back patio, and then, as Angel said, a couple of presentations we had with staff, it became clear that the better use of the budget was actually to look at the front door of the building, because there would be a much stronger use of that space. The fear was that by developing the back, you would spend the money but not get people back there. They wouldn't go that far into the project. So this made sense from a logical movement and functional use of the entire building as far as our, deliberations.
So I still have concerns about the outdoor patio and the limited use because of limited access. I mean, I know some folks sit outside waiting for the bus and all, but if in the way that's enclosed, you really have only one way to get there. If you're coming from the addition.
You're
if you're in
talking
a wheel-
about here?
Yes, yes.
There. That's not enclosed. That's basically.
Well, I mean, it's, a space is made by the landscaping and the wall.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I meant, not enclosed inside, but. Yeah, so, in other words, if you want to use that outdoor patio, you either have to be able-bodied, not in a wheelchair, or you have to go all the way outside.
Well, actually, a wheelchair southbound person could go like that,
Right, but if you're
then
inside,
continue up.
if you're already inside,
Then you come back out and you go like that, and you go like that.
yeah. But if you're sitting in the living room, which you've got labeled as living room, and I know that's flexible, you have to go all the way up and around and out just to sit on the patio. Now, I understand if someone is getting ready to leave and they're just waiting for a ride, yeah, I mean, they're going to go that way anyway. But, I mean, is it possible to build it so that there's space, like tiered, so that if you do want to just come outside from the living room, that you're on the same level? And you could still have maybe another table down on the ground, you know?
Well, I mean, I know
Regular
in
grade?
talking with the staff, they really liked the patio, and they actually wanted to increase the size of the patio. So that's one of the things that we have on our agenda.
Well, you could do that.
I think that would, but that wouldn't address your issue.
Well, as long as you have something that is, you know, you can set up a table and chairs at one level, that's, you know, along with a parking lot grade, and then another one that's at the same level as the floor of the addition.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. That's a good idea. Let us look into that.
Okay, thank
See
you.
if we can make it happen in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Penny said she doesn't want to ask a question now. All right. All we were to do is to receive information. Janice, did you want to add something?
The whole idea, Janice Tyler, Department on Aging Director, that was really found space for us because that door was an emergency exit door, is the reason the door's there. So we requested to have that patio space, even though we still have plenty of patio space in the back. But we just thought, well, rather than filling it in totally with plants, there would be room there for a couple tables with the umbrellas. Yeah.
Yes.
At the same time, I just think that I guess my campaign is to make sure that everybody can get everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you can't, if people are going to I mean, if you're saying that that is just an emergency exit, and
That's
it's gonna be
originally what
locked,
it was designed for, yes.
but if it's going to change, I just want everyone to have access to it if possible, or, you know, the option of going outside through that door. If it's always going to be, if it's a fire exit, that's different, but
I don't know how it will be labeled. Will it be labeled as a fire exit? I think, yeah.
and so no one will be able to exit that door to get to the patio unless there's, I mean,
An emergency.
right.
No.
Well, then in that case, then that goes back to my original argument that you know, even if both tables or setups may not be accessible to everyone, at least one, I just think that everyone should be able to have access to that space outside.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Did you have any more, Ken? I don't want to.
Nope. Thank you.
All right, so those were good suggestions, and I think he'll look at those, and thank you all. All right, moving on now to the consent agenda is item 8. Is there anything anybody wants to pull from the consent agenda?
Move the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull item 8J just for one quick question, since I wasn't here for the discussion about it last time. It'll take 1 second. Okay, so there's a
The rest of the consent agenda.
Second.
motion's been made and seconded for all the rest of the consent agenda except item 8J. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. So my question on 8J, which is this thing about the sheriffs, and this maybe is a question for the manager, since I don't think any of these folks are here. So there's this section that says these parcels are going to transfer under the Weed and Seed Initiative to a Weed and Seed recipient, a private nonprofit organization. Do we know who that Weed and Seed recipient is, and who picks, who's going to decide who gets that?
We do not know who that is, and we will decide, as the board will decide who that will be. And some of those parcels will also be connected to the Cedar Grove Park, And so those also are other community programs. So that hasn't been decided at this time, but
So
it will
that's
be
good. So that
decided.
we will decide, not the sheriff's
Yes,
office will
yes,
decide.
Yes, for our parcels.
The other thing I would suggest, because weed and seed recipients can include housing, that we should think about talking to our affordable housing partners for applying for that weed and seed grant, because we may, if we want to see housing on any of this, that would be a goal. So
Okay.
I just put that out there. All right, with that, I'll move the item.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion passes 7-0. County managers report.
I have nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
County attorney's report.
Nothing tonight.
All right, then we go on to appointments. 11A, we took off the agenda, so now we go to 11B, which is the Commission for the Environment. Oh, we should have moved this up. Well, you have to stay anyway, so yeah, okay, I don't feel bad. Okay, so there's 2 recommendations for 2 slots. And then will be a couple of positions that remaining vacant. So this is the point in the meeting where somebody makes a motion to nominate somebody, or,
I'll nominate or make a motion for Will Stanley, position 7, Bradley Saul, position 15.
okay, motion has been made and seconded for Will Stanley for position 7, Bradley Saul for position 15. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Now, just to note, there are 2 more vacancies. One has been vacant since December of 16. One has been vacant since May of 17. So the one that's been vacant since December 31 is subject to having its restrictions lifted. The DEPR has asked us to delay making an at-large appointment as they are pursuing a candidate. So is there any discussion about that? Do you want to keep that open? All right, we will honor DEPR's request in that regard, but better come back soon, Dave. Excellent. Okay, next item is the Hillsborough Planning Board. This is item 11C.
I'll move that we accept Chris Johnson in position 3.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for Chris Johnston for position 3. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. And then just note that Hillsborough ETJ has been vacant since 8/21/2017, and we're waiting for... Okay, and they're going to decide what they want to do, or who they're going to nominate, or if they're just
They
going to...
called today and just
Okay.
verified that with me.
Excellent. Oh, that's why we pay you the big bucks, Donna. Okay, item 11D is the Human Relations Commission. And there are several slots to fill.
I have a question.
Yes, Penny.
Cheryl Hampton is here as well, if they have any questions.
I just heard that someone resigned their position also, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that listed here?
It would be, yes, and let me see if I have that email. It's Mr. Rollins, yes, and he is a Hillsborough position, I do believe, and so I think they're going to consider making the resolution next time. Yeah. Yeah, his wife is ill. And we got that email last week on the 25th.
Okay.
So if all the positions are filled, you'll have 2 Town of Hillsborough, and we're waiting for resolutions for those as well.
entertaining nominations.
Yeah, floor is open.
I nominate Ms. Kinzer for position number 1, Ms. Chang for 4, Mr. Xavier for 5, Ms. Spencer for 6, Ms. Garcia Turner for 8, Mr. Case for 9, Ms. White for 16, Ms. Podger for 17, and Mr. Ryan for 18.
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded for all the recommended folks. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Now we're on 11E, Orange County Housing Authority. And I'll accept motions. And I have one as well that I'd like to. So I would like to nominate Phil Venable for position 5, the at-large position.
I'll second that.
May I ask where these nominees came from that are listed? Is this from the board, or is this, how did they get put in these slots?
Yep.
You should go up to
Yep.
David gets upset with us.
I apologize, Commissioners. Some are from the board. One position is a required HCVP program participant, and that board has several vacancies, so would be really good if your decision could come this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, there is a letter in the packet.
4.
On page 4 regarding these two nominees that they make. And just to be clear, that letter says there are 3 vacancies, but according to the face sheet,
It's only 2.
you said there's only 2. Okay.
That complicates it a little.
All right, so there's been one motion made and seconded for the at-large seats. And Mr. Reynolds is the resident member that
So he,
Cheryl was just talking about.
so I'll nominate Mr. Reynolds for position 6. Because that, we need that, right? That's resident member.
Did I hear you second that?
I did.
Oh, okay. So that was seconded. So we've got,
Did you say?
yeah, Barry seconded it. So any other nominations? All right, so we've got a motion for Phil Venable for position, I'm looking back, 5, and Mr. Reynolds for position 6, right? Yes, okay. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. And now we're at the Orange Unified Transportation Board appointment.
As you will remember, Mr. Vaughn, we deferred his appointment last time because of his attendance. We received an email, which I share with the chair and vice chair. It was for personal reasons, family reasons, and we preferred not to put it into a public document, but it seemed to satisfy the reasons for his absences, the chair, vice chair, so we brought it forward.
Yeah, I would say we would consider them excused absences based on what we learned, so.
I'll nominate Mr. Vaughn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for Mr. Vaughn for position 3. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. And now, the end is near. Now there are some information items there, and then we're going to go into closed. I need a motion to go into closed session to discuss 2 matters. One, to discuss the county's position and instruct the county manager and county attorney on a negotiating position regarding the terms of a contract to purchase real property. And 2, to discuss matters related to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the public body in negotiations. That second point we added at the beginning of the meeting.
So moved?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to go into closed session on those two items. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? We're in closed session.